Glad you're here. Couple of quick bullet points that I want to fly through as we get settled in. The stories in this compilation have been featured on the channel before, and this time I've remastered the audio to make sure that you're able to sleep peacefully undisturbed or get work done while this is on in the background. I also made sure that there were no ad breaks after the 15-minute mark of this episode. Again, the point of all of this is to make sure that you can either work productively or sleep peacefully. Speaking of sleep, this episode is sponsored by Manta Sleep. Why is she looking at me like that? This mask is so soft and infinitely adjustable it'll change shape with your face in case your eyes get all wonky in the middle of the night. It's got 100% blackout and there's zero pressure on the eye cups. That's because they are super spacious, which means you can go to sleep with a full face of makeup on, I guess, and not mess up your mascara eyeliner combo. Look, she's got 1,000 gigawatt light shining right on her face, and I bet she still can't see a thing. Manta Sleep. Use code GLITCH for 10% off of your order. Alright, so check this out. A few years ago, I got a phone call from a man who asked for me by name. And not just my first name, my full name. He sounded perfectly normal. He said he was just calling to confirm our plans to meet in central London that afternoon so I could give him the tickets to a Ting Tings gig. Apparently, I had tickets and he wanted them. But there was just one problem. I had absolutely no idea what he was talking about. I hadn't made any plans to meet anybody. I didn't have tickets to any concert. I didn't even know who the Ting Tings were. And I wasn't even remotely located near London that day. I was hours away. So I told him all of that. And then there was this pause on the other end of the line, and then he insisted, very politely but still firmly, that we had arranged it online. He said that we'd agreed to meet in central London that afternoon. He even sounded mildly confused that I would question that. Meanwhile, I had no clue who he was. Normally, I would have just assumed it was a wrong number. That's the most obvious explanation, I think you'd probably agree. Except my name is incredibly uncommon in the UK. And at the time, I was using my married name, which you can't just randomly guess. So the chances of someone accidentally calling a person with my exact name about very specific plans that I supposedly made felt slim. I tried to explain to the guy again that I had no idea who he was and I had never listed any tickets, but he was completely certain. He didn't sound like he was joking. He wasn't being aggressive or weird or anything. In fact, if anything, he was more disappointed and maybe a little suspicious. Kind of like I was messing around with him or backing out at the last minute. I did feel bad, for disappointing him. I could almost hear him thinking that I was just wasting his time. But I promise, I had no idea who this guy was. I don't know anyone who would give out my name and number to a stranger as a prank either. And even if they did, it would be an incredibly boring joke, right? Let's trick someone into thinking they're getting free Ting Tings tickets. It's not exactly elaborate. The whole thing just left me with no sensible explanation. To this day, I still think about it sometimes. Somewhere out there, there's a version of events where I did have Ting Tings tickets, where I did arrange to meet with a stranger in central London, and where I maybe even stood there at the agreed meeting spot, wondering why he never showed up. I can't help but wonder if there is some universe out there right next to ours, where I did meet with this guy and I did exchange tickets, but somehow the version of me that I know ended up in this universe, having no idea what this guy was talking about. What do you think? This is my first post, and it's about something that happened back in 2020. I had gotten my first vinyl record player. It was a Crosley CR24-003A. I honestly don't remember if I bought it at a yard sale or if someone gave it to me, but either way, I was hyped. I never owned a record player before. The first record I bought was Igor by Tyler the Creator. It came out in 2019. I was super excited to finally play it, but I had no idea what I was doing. It took me a while to even get the thing working. So I ended up watching YouTube tutorials on how to use a record player properly. Eventually, I put the needle down on the record and a Tyler song starts playing, but I almost immediately realized that something was off. The song that was playing was 911 Mr. Lonely. I remember just freezing and thinking, no way, this song isn't on the Igor album. It's from the Flower Boy album that came out 2 years prior. It was the same artist, of course, but a completely different album. I was confused, but I was also kind of excited because 911 Mr. Lonely is one of my favorite Tyler songs. So I lifted the needle, thinking that I would just replay it while I figured out what was going on. But the song didn't come on. I tried over and over to get the song to come back. I moved the needle around, I restarted the record again, I even replayed different sections of the record, and nothing. The album just played normally after that, just all of the Igor tracks in order like it was supposed to, and I never heard 911 Mr. Lonely on that record again. To this day, I swear I heard that song on that record. It wasn't like it was just coming from another device or something. It was clearly coming from the record player. I don't even have the player anymore, unfortunately, so there's no way to test it or to recreate it at this point. I don't know if it was a mechanical glitch or a user error or my brain doing something weird, or maybe just a sudden and quick time-lapse change. Like I jumped from one universe to another where that record has that song all the time and then I jumped back. It still feels like a straight-up glitch in the Matrix to me. Somebody in the comments is being helpful and they say, hey, I don't know if this applies, but some records have secret sides, meaning there are actually 2 sets of grooves in which side plays depending on where you drop the needle. I first encountered this when I was a kid back in the 70s with another Monty Python record. The second side of the disc was made like this, and after having played many number of times, it suddenly was a different record. As you can imagine, I freaked out before I figured what was going on. And then the OP responds with, oh, that's interesting, because the Igor album is double-sided with A and B, but I played through the whole album on both sides, and I never heard the song again. And then the original commenter replies with, I get that, but maybe you just have to drop it into the secret groove on the one side. I listened to that Monty Python record several dozen times before I discovered the, quote, third side. I've been intrigued by the idea of reality shifting for a long time. Recently, what really pulled me toward wanting to try it was losing someone that I loved, someone that I truly believed I could have had a future with. While searching for answers, I realized that there's a lot of different names for this concept. Timeline jumping, timeline hopping, dimension jumping, parallel universes. No matter what it's called, I believe in it. I want to experience it, and I know there's still so much to learn. Anyway, while trying to focus on this theory, 2 strange things happened today, and they really stuck with me. Lately, I've felt myself slowly stepping out of the heavy loop of grieving this person not being here anymore. I still acknowledge the loss, of course, but instead of only focusing on the pain, I've been thinking more about when I'll talk to them again. I've been holding on to happy thoughts. Then today, I got a missed call from the city that he's from. I called the number back, and then it said that number doesn't exist. The second thing that happened was at a salon that I go to regularly. I was heading there for an appointment, and on my way, I tried to call them. The number was out of service, which is of course unusual for a business, and then I noticed that the picture on Google didn't even look the same as I remembered. When I walked in and I asked for the person that I usually see, they weren't there, which normally would be fine, but I mentioned to the woman at the front desk that their phone number wasn't working. Anyway, long story short, she seemed confused at first, and then I showed her the number that I called just a few minutes ago, and she said that that was a number that they had stopped using about 2 years ago. I also mentioned that she looked familiar and that she should probably recognize me too since I come to this salon often, but she seemed genuinely confused and acted like she had never seen me before. I go to this location regularly for all of my salon services. Do you think I time jumped? Do you think it's possible that in the time that it took for me to learn the principles of time jumping and even gather all of the different names that it goes by, that I actually did it? Can someone explain this? Before I tell you what happened, I need you to understand something. This isn't just one instance of somebody thought they saw me. It's not a mistaken identity or any weird coincidence. It's something that I've noticed for as long as I can remember. People, especially people that I'm close to, have been seeing me in places that I've never been. They say that they see me clearly. They call out my name, they wave to me, they describe exactly what I'm wearing and what I was doing, but every single time, I wasn't there. At first, it felt like harmless misunderstandings, but after years of this happening over and over with different people in my life, I don't know, it starts to feel harder to brush off. I don't know if I need to call it a doppelganger situation, or maybe something is slipping in and out of parallel universes that looks like me. I guess I'll leave that up to you to decide. It started when I was really little, maybe around 8 years old. My dad worked late and would come home at about 2 in the morning every night, and then when he did, he would watch TV in the living room. One night, he saw me peeking through the pillars that we have in the hallway. He called out my name, but then he says he didn't see me anymore. So he gets up to investigate, and then he ends up in my room where he sees me asleep. Then, when I was 18, I went to see the Barbie movie and I curled my hair that day. I came home and went to my room. My dad was smoking a cigarette while watching TV. He does this by cracking the back door open and smokes outside while still being able to see the TV. And while he was standing at the back door, he says he saw me in the hallway looking at him. He felt something was off, so he yelled out, "Hey." And then whatever was there that looked like me ran out of sight back towards my room. A few weeks later, my grandpa was over and he was visiting, and he said that he saw me walk into my closet in my bedroom when I was actually in the bathroom, showering. The next time someone different saw me, it was my best friend. When I was 19, I moved in with her and her family. She works nights with her mom, and they were coming home at about 5 a.m., and then she tells me that she remembers parking her car outside and then seeing me in my car next to them in the driveway. She says that she saw me sitting in my car, just staring ahead into nothingness with a blank face. She says that this creeped her out, but she ended up going inside into our room that we shared, and then she saw me asleep in the bed. And it doesn't stop there. I have about 4 other people who have said that they've seen me, and this all happened at work. Every now and then, I'll take a day off, right? And on 2 separate occasions, months apart, 2 different coworkers came up to me. These are people who have never talked to each other, and I barely talked to either of them. And both of them asked me the exact same thing. They said, "Hey, you were here yesterday? I swear I saw you." And both times I told them no, it was my day off, I didn't come in. Yet each of them swore that they saw me. I didn't really connect the dots at first, I just thought it was weird. Until the next incidents happened. I have a best friend at work. She's 48 and I'm 20. We talk every single day and she knows everything about me. Anytime someone comes up to me and says that they saw me when I wasn't there, she's usually standing right next to me. We'll look at each other, laugh it off and say, "Oh, that's weird," and then move on. Until one day it just got too hard to ignore. There was a week when I didn't go into work for 2 days because the area that I work in was closed. We ended up having to work overtime later to make up for it. The following week, once everything was back to normal, my best friend and I went to the restroom together like we always do. She went into a stall, and I stood by the sink to wait for her. A girl that I see around all the time walked up to me and said, "Hey, I barely saw you last week." I told her, "Yeah, we couldn't come in. Our department was closed." And she looked confused and said, "Well, wait, but I still saw you." At first, she thought maybe she had the days mixed up or something, but then she said, "No, I swear I saw you. I saw you both of those days. You had your work badge and your equipment and everything." Now she starts freaking out, and that's when I tell her, "Hey, you're not the first person to tell me that they've seen me when I wasn't there." Right then, my best friend walked out of the stall and added, "Yeah, people come up to us and say that all the time." And that made the girl even more upset. But weirdly enough, that moment kind of bonded us. Since then, we've actually become friends. Then, the next week, something happened that really stuck with me. My best friend and I were coming back from break, and we split off into different parts of the building where we couldn't see each other. I was training somebody that day, so I stayed in my section. About 40 minutes later, I walked into her side of the building and then headed to the restroom. She was already in there. As soon as she saw me, she said, "Oh, I'm glad you're here. I have to tell you something. Were you in my area after our break ended?" And I said, "What do you mean? Of course not. We separated." She told me that right after our break, when she got back to her section, she saw me walking out of one of the aisles. She got excited and waved at me. And then she said that I just stared at her. I didn't smile. I didn't wave back. She said it looked like I didn't even notice her. And then she saw me walk back into the aisle and disappear. Now, I would never do that to her. She's my bestie. That would be so rude, and plus, she's also like a mother to me. I wouldn't do that. So now I'm confused. Too many people have experienced this for it to feel like a coincidence. And no one at my job looks like me, not even a little bit. So why does this keep happening? Has anyone else experienced anything like this? I need answers, and I really just want to know if this means anything. I just posted this as a comment in the Mandela Effect subreddit, but after some more thought, I figured I'd post it here as well to see if anyone has ever come across anything like this before. Has anyone ever moved a far distance and then noticed a close family member or friend and you start to have different childhood memories? This is happening to me right now, and I honestly can't explain it. My brother and I grew up being close and always have been, and we remain so today in our 40s. I used to love sending him new Mandela effects that I'd read about and have the wrong memory about. I'd send them to my brother, and sure enough, he'd remember the same as me. less than 2 years ago, I moved thousands of miles away from where he and our family has always lived. The weirdest thing that I started to notice as I'd send him these newly discovered Mandela effects is that now he's remembering them differently, more often than not, from myself and my wife. My wife and I consistently share the same memories of these things when they come up, and my brother used to as well. But now it seems like, since I've moved so far away, our memories are starting to diverge. My brother seems to be remembering one version of the Mandela effect differently than how I do. It's so odd, and I honestly wish I was making this up. Something interesting happened today that made me wonder if I actually jumped into a parallel universe. First, some context. I am regular at meditation, and I can hold myself in a long meditative state, though I've been fascinated by the idea of jumping timelines, but I've never experienced it before today. So, I'm a professional trader, and today I had a short position in a stock, and I wanted it to close below a certain level, but it started to go against me. I don't know what came to my mind, but I closed my eyes and I just put out the message. I said, I want to jump to a timeline where this stock immediately starts falling from here. I opened my eyes, and I couldn't believe it. The stock started falling at that very moment. Then again, a moment later, I closed my eyes and I said out loud, I want to jump to a timeline where it closes below 350 today. And then it actually did. I mean, I can't believe I experienced something like that. It could be a coincidence, I know, I'm aware of that, but I don't know, I genuinely felt something shift in me and around me when I put out those messages. You never know. I might be the next billionaire trader. Kidding. Jokes aside, this was truly fascinating. This is my first ever post on Reddit, and I thought that I'd share it with you guys here to maybe have some insights. Have you experienced anything similar? Do you think I could have actually jumped timelines, or does it seem more like a coincidence? I'm not even sure if this is the right place to post this, but I'm really so tripped out right now. I want to know if this has ever happened to anybody else, or if there might be a deeper meaning behind this. By the way, I'm also spiritual, so I'm open to any feedback and any theories. I also have wild ADHD, so sorry if this story is all over the place. Just bear with me. So I have a 5-year-old German Shepherd Doberman mix. She has more of the German Shepherd features, but her fur lays flatter than a full-bred German Shepherd. I've lived in my house for about 10 years now. I'm very friendly with my neighbors, and we're all in a group chat, and we have each other's numbers. My other dog passed away a few months back, and ever since then, my current dog has been jumping the fence and just wandering around my block when I leave her outside while I go run a quick errand or something. She wanders for about 5 to 10 minutes and then just goes back to the porch and hangs out there until I get home. She's very friendly. All of my neighbors know her, and they'll usually text me with a, "Hey, your pup jumped again, but she's back on the porch. Just wanted to let you know." And that's all. Since then, I've added height to the area that she was jumping from, and we no longer have that issue. Anyway, there's enough of the context information. On to the weird thing. So, recently, I had a Super Bowl party to go to. I had to pick up some snacks and drinks on the way, and my boyfriend was planning on just meeting me there. I asked him to just leave the TV on for my dog and make sure she's comfy before he left, and to, of course, lock up. Well, fast forward to about 11 p.m. when I was getting home, there was my dog. on the front porch. I was so confused until I saw her collar and custom name tag and the markings on her face and thought, oh, maybe she didn't want to go inside when my boyfriend left, so he left her outside and just forgot to tell me. So I rolled my window down and I called my dog's name to come into my car so that we can go into the gated driveway and go into the house through the back door. She got excited and wanted to chase my car into the driveway instead, which she does often. So I opened the gate, I drove up, and I waited for her to follow me in. I looked back and she was walking down the sidewalk and I thought, okay, she probably just needs to go potty first. I'll give her a minute. So now I'm going inside to put my bags down and then I'll go back out to get her. I open the back door that leads to my sunroom and there's my dog, sound asleep on her couch with Bluey on the TV. My heart dropped and I thought, am I okay? Am I high? I swear that was my dog in the front yard that I just drove past now. I've had her since she was 6 weeks old, and she's had the same collar and the same tag almost since. I know my dog. I run back outside to the front, and that dog that was there, chasing my car in the driveway, is nowhere to be found. I whistled, I called out her name, I did everything, but there was no dog. I'm truly so shaken up by this, and I don't even know if I should be, to be honest. Like I said, I've lived in this house for 10 years. I know everyone, even the ones in the surrounding streets, and nobody else has a German Shepherd, much less one that looks like mine with the flatter laying fur. So I'm just dying to know. Has anything similar ever happened to you? Because this is so weird. My neighbor has cameras all over his house, so I'm going to ask him if he picked up any footage of this dog tomorrow. And honestly, the weirdest thing to me was the collar and the name tag. I probably wouldn't be this freaked out if it wasn't for that. And before you all ask, no, I'm not under any influence at all. Somebody in the comments mentions, your dog might have been astral projecting. Dogs dream, and so they likely have a spiritual being just like we do. Many studies claim humans can leave their bodies, and you may have a powerful testimony here of a dog that actually did the same thing. Rupert Sheldrake, an alternative scientist, has written about studies that show definitely that dogs have the ability to sense when their owners are coming home after an absence. And your dog apparently was really intensely anticipating your return so much that he might have astral projected. Now, you and I are going to jump to a parallel universe where I still do the No Way files. On a foggy afternoon in 1935, Wing Commander Victor Goddard sat alone in his cockpit in Scotland, preparing to complete a routine flight from Edinburgh back to his base at Andover, England. He'd been flying for years, through wars, storms, and countless dawns and dusks, and he was, by all accounts, one of the most capable pilots in the Royal Air Force. He checked his instruments once more before lifting into the gray Scottish sky, unaware that in the next few minutes he would experience something that would haunt him for decades. Earlier that day, Goddard had passed over a small RAF airfield near the village of Drem in Scotland. At the time, it was completely abandoned. Barns and grazing fields had overtaken the once busy runways. Grass was sprouting through the cracked tarmac, and cattle grazed where aircraft was once taxied. He'd seen it all with his own eyes only hours earlier. But now, as he navigated through a sudden and violent storm, hail lashing against the canopy and wind buffeting his Hawker Hart biplane, his instincts told him to turn back. The visibility was getting terrible, He could hardly see anything at this point, and his instruments were starting to fail as well, and he knew from years in the sky that pushing forward would mean certain disaster. He climbed sharply, struggling to break free of the towering cumulonimbus clouds, and then, as though someone flipped a switch, the storm was over. One moment, the wind was howling and the rain was cutting through things like knives, and the next moment, the world around him was washed in this bright sunlight. Goddard blinked against the glare and instinctively looked down, and below him was Drem Airfield, but it was nothing like the deserted ruin that he had just seen a couple of hours earlier. It was alive. 4 planes sat gleaming on freshly mowed grass. All of them were painted this striking yellow color, colors that Goddard had never seen on any RAF aircraft at the time. The mechanics on the ground were wearing blue overalls, and they were scurrying beneath wings and propellers. And there, closest to the control hut, was a monoplane that Goddard couldn't place at all, a type that simply didn't exist in the RAF in 1935. For a brief moment, it felt like he'd stumbled into another world. Instead of landing or even slowing down, Victor, bewildered and half afraid to linger, he flew over the runway and climbed back into the sky. Once he was above everything again, the weird vision faded as abruptly as it had appeared. The storm returned, the violent winds, the choking clouds, and Goddard fought his plane all the way back to Andover. On the ground, he told a few of his fellow officers what he'd seen, but none of them believed him. They assumed that he just misremembered due to the stress of the flight, and some of them joked that maybe the storm just scrambled his senses. Others said that he was too tired, but his account was so specific. He remembered seeing the mechanics wearing blue overalls, something that no mechanics in the day actually did, that one unfamiliar plane, and the immaculate runway. No one, however, believed that Victor had really been to the future. Just 4 years later, in 1939, at the outbreak of the Second World War, the RAF reopened Drem Airfield. The abandoned group was resurfaced, the buildings were repaired, and to the astonishment of many, training aircraft were painted yellow now, just like the ones that Goddard had described. Mechanics were also now wearing blue overalls, and they worked on the field as the station came back to life. Even the unfamiliar monoplane that he remembered seeing, years ahead of its time in Goddard's original vision, was now a real RAF model. It was the Miles M14 Magister. Everything Goddard claimed to have seen, like the planes and the uniforms and the airfield itself, had come to pass exactly as he described 4 years prior. At the time, Goddard believed that he had seen something impossible, a time slip, a jump to a parallel universe, and some sort of brief glimpse into the future. He spent the rest of his life wrestling with what happened that day, struggling to reconcile it with logic and memory and the reality that he knew. Today, skeptics say it was simply misperception. Others say it was a trick of the weather and a pilot's mind under stress. But the story of Sir Victor Goddard remains one of the most compelling, maybe true events in the history of all of aviation. A tale told by a decorated RAF commander whose resume was far too credible for many to simply call him a liar. What do you think Victor saw that day? I used to live in Alameda, California, back when my job required a lot of driving up and down the state. Most weeks looked exactly the same. Monday morning, I'd make some coffee, load in the car, and then head south for work. Friday evening, I would do the same thing in reverse. Long highway miles stretching back toward the bay. If you've ever driven California's 101, then you know what I'm talking about. Long, open stretches, farmland, hills rolling away on either side. After doing the trip enough times, the drive almost becomes muscle memory. About 200 miles south of Alameda, there's a town called Paso Robles. If you've driven that route, then, well, you certainly know it. It's one of those perfect mid-drive stops that's just big enough to have plenty of gas stations and restaurants, and small enough that you're not really fighting city traffic just to grab dinner. For me, Paso Robles was the place that I would stop, gas up, and grab some food. Now, I would do that just about every Friday. I'd usually stop there, fill up the tank, stretch my legs a little bit, and then grab something to eat before finishing the last stretch north. By 2018, I had done this drive so many times, I barely thought about it anymore. But one trip, in late March of 2018, still bothers me to this day. That Friday evening was completely normal. Nothing about it stood out at the time. I'd wrapped up work in Southern California and then started the long drive north sometime in the afternoon. The sky was clear and traffic wasn't terrible. I pulled into Paso Robles right around dinner time. I remember feeling relieved to finally be able to get out of the car. After hours of driving, even 5 minutes standing on the concrete next to the pump honestly feels good. I filled the tank, and then I went inside to grab some food. Nothing fancy, just something quick to sit down and chow on before I jumped back out. I sat at a small table by the window, and I started to watch cars pull off the highway while I ate. The sun was starting to set just a little bit. The sky was this orange and purple color. Everything about it just felt, normal. After dinner, I walked back out to the car. I tossed the trash in the bin near the pumps, and then I got settled in for the final leg of the drive. The last stretch, going from Paso Robles back to Alameda. It's usually the longest feeling part of the trip. I'm tired, it's getting dark, and there's still several hours left. Before I pulled out, though, I did what I always did. I texted my wife, letting her know I was leaving Paso Robles and that I would likely be home long after she was asleep because it's another 200 miles to go. I remember glancing at the time on my phone as I sent it. It was about 7:30 p.m. Then I merged back into the highway and started my drive north. I put on a podcast, something that I'd just been listening to a lot during these drives. I don't know, true crime or history or something. I don't remember which one. And the miles just rolled on and on. If you've ever taken a drive like this, then you probably know the feeling I'm about to describe. There's a point where your brain just turns off, I guess. I know it's crazy to say when you're in the middle of driving on the highway, but somehow you're still able to do it safely and watch the road, but all the details just kind of blur together. And that's exactly what happened. I settled into that flow state of driving. Eventually, I pulled into my neighborhood in Alameda. I parked the car, I grabbed my bag, and then I walked up to the front door. And then I noticed that inside the house, all of the lights were still on. And as I opened the door, I saw my wife still awake in the living room. And then when she saw me walk in, she looked genuinely surprised. And it wasn't like your typical, "Hey, you're home," kind of surprise. This felt like she was confused. She said something along the lines of, "You're back already?" At first, I didn't think much of it. I just assumed she had lost track or something. I told her the drive was good, nothing unusual. And then she said something that just stopped me in my tracks. She told me that she hadn't even started to get ready for bed yet because she expected me to be home much later. So instinctively, I pull out my phone, I look at the clock, and it was 9:30. From Paso Robles to Alameda is, again, 200 miles. On a good day, with traffic that doesn't suck, that drive takes about 3.5 to 4 hours sometimes. 2 hours had passed. To cover 200 miles, over those 2 hours, I would have had to average over 100 miles an hour the entire drive. And I'm driving a 2017 Ford Edge that's not a race car. I don't do that. I know people talk about lost time stories occasionally. Stories where someone drives for an hour, but it only feels like 10 minutes, or they realize there's a chunk of time that they simply can't account for. But this was the opposite. I didn't lose time, I gained it. And thinking back on it now, the weirdest part was that nothing during the drive felt weird at all. I still have absolutely no idea what happened. I know that memory can be imperfect, so I want to be very specific and transparent here. I'm not trying to be dramatic, but it is unsettling enough that I cannot shake this. My girlfriend drives a white Camry. For the longest time, I remember her license plate being a number, and then the letters J-U-E, and then more numbers towards the end. A couple of weeks before I realized what was happening, the four of us, me, my girlfriend, her adult son, and his girlfriend, were on a longer drive out of town. We somehow got onto the topic of remembering license plates and number patterns. I remember explicitly saying that I remembered my girlfriend's plate as J-U-E, and that it stuck in my head because I always pronounced it as Jew, internally. Just a direct phonetic mnemonic for the order of those letters. That detail is important to me, because if the plate had been U-E-J this whole time, then, I know that would not have been the mnemonic device that my brain used. I would have remembered it as something else, like the E-U-J canal, similar to the Suez Canal, because that's the association I naturally make with that letter order now. I wouldn't have mentally labeled it J-U-E or Jew unless that was the actual left to right sequence on the plate. I've always been good at remembering little blocks of patterns like that. License plates, old video game cheat codes, up, up, down, down, left, right, BA start, stuff like that. Even certain phone numbers from when I was a kid, and sometimes full credit card numbers too. This wasn't like a vague or a casual memory. Now fast forward to the day that it actually happened. My girlfriend and I were meeting at an IHOP to grab a meal. I parked next to a white Camry, and I noticed the plate was number and then U-E-J. And I remember thinking, oh, okay, that's weird. That's really close to my girlfriend's plate, who also drives a white Camry. Now, what stood out is that I didn't think I had been wrong at all, right? Of course. I was certain that her plate was not U-E-J, which is exactly why it felt strange. I looked even more closely, and I noticed a couple of items inside that car that belonged to my girlfriend, and then I realized it actually was her car. Same everything, same color, same all of it. Just the letters on the plate were now reversed. I walked into the IHOP still confused, and the very first thing that I asked her as I slid into the booth was, "Did you change your plates?" That was my immediate reaction, before we even ordered or talked about anything else. I then asked if she could pull up our insurance card on the Progressive app so that I could double check the plate number. And oddly, the app wouldn't load anything at all. It was unresponsive, and we couldn't access the card. When I told her why I was asking all of this, and then when I pointed out the plate, she said it had always been U-E-J, and she doesn't remember it ever being J-U-E, or Jew, as it's always been in my head. I know how this sounds, and I've tried to explain it away as just a memory error, but what really bothers me is I had repeated exposure to that plate over time. I had a very specific mnemonic tied to the exact order of the letters. I referenced that order out loud in a conversation just weeks earlier on that long drive with 3 other people. I noticed the difference immediately before consciously realizing it was her car, and finally, my first reaction was to ask if the plates had been changed instead of assuming I was wrong. Nothing else strange happened regarding the plates. There was no missing time, no other glitches or anything like that. Just this one very small change that doesn't line up with my memory at all. I don't think I'm claiming anything, supernatural, and I can't ever prove that it was JUE before, but this didn't feel like a vague misremembering. It felt like a detail was rearranged without me noticing. And I'm just wondering if anyone else has experienced something this specific, where the elements are the same, just appearing in a different order. There's a couple of interesting comments underneath this story, and one of them says, "We must both be in the same reversed timeline because my office has 2 doors outside of the workshop. The access to get in has always been 5-7. And I've always tied my memory to that, specific set of numbers, 5-7, in that ascending order. I often open that door and use it several times a day. Well, last year we had a refurb, and after that, I couldn't open the door. I asked around and everyone started telling me that the code was now 7-5 and that it always has been. All of a sudden, I must have time shifted or parallel jumped or something to a universe where the code was now descending. It's been a few months now, and I will forever be weirded out by this." Another person asks a very specific question. They say, "Do you or your girlfriend have any older photos of the car? Maybe from previous trips, or just candid photos or anything?" And then someone else responds with, "Doesn't matter. He switched timelines. In this timeline, it's always been UEJ." So this was when I was a senior in high school, probably 10 years ago. Every morning before school, I had the same routine. I'd wake up to go downstairs to my kitchen, make a random frozen breakfast sandwich, shout out Jimmy Dean, with a glass of water, and then bring it up to my room to eat, and then shower, and then off to school I go. Now, on the morning that this happened, it was the exact same thing, except when I brought my breakfast upstairs, I realized I forgot my glass of water on the counter. I realized as soon as I hit the top of the stairs, of course. So, between me leaving the kitchen and then realizing I left the water, it couldn't have been more than 30 seconds. So, I turn around, I walk downstairs to go grab the water, and then the second I walk into the kitchen, I went completely numb, almost frozen in fear, because now every single cabinet and drawer in the kitchen was wide open. I'm talking more than 10 drawers and cupboards. They were all wide open within the span of just 30 seconds. I'm the only one awake at this time every morning, and even if someone else was awake in the house, I would have seen them and most certainly heard them open those cabinets, and they also would have had to walk past me down the stairs to get to the kitchen. To this day, I have no idea what could have happened. Maybe just a tired morning fog brain, and I don't know, I did it myself without realizing, but I don't know why I would do that. Truly, no idea, but every time I tell this story, it still sends shivers up and down my spine. This happened a few years ago, but I still think about it whenever someone shares a glitch story. I was working in a small dental office with just one doctor. So there was mostly one patient at a time, traffic, and the office was quiet when there was no patient in. It was a couple of minutes before when our next patient was supposed to arrive. The doctor and I were in the back office, and the phone rang and went to voicemail, so the doctor and I tuned in to listen to what it was. It was our next patient calling to let us know they were running a few minutes behind, but would be there soon. After the voicemail finished, we went to tell the front desk that they had called and that they would be a little late to check in. After we notify her of this, she informs us that the patient was already here and that she had arrived just a minute ago and had been talking to her. The doctor and I both heard the door chime at the exact same time that the voicemail was being recorded, but we had assumed that the door chime was from somebody else walking in that wasn't scheduled. The doctor and I made a comment to the patient, something along the lines of, "Oh, we just got your voicemail. You didn't end up being late at all," as it was now the exact time that the patient was scheduled for. The patient then informs us that she never left a voicemail. She never called. I remember the doctor and I both just staring at each other for a moment with eyes wide and saying, "Whoa, that was weird." We both know for a fact that we heard that very same patient leave a voicemail with her name and appointment time letting us know she was going to be late. However, here she was, right now in the office chatting to both of us, right on time. There's a couple of intriguing and kind of prodding questions in the comments. One of them asks, "Okay, and then you didn't show the patient the voicemail? Seems like a missed opportunity." And the OP responds with, "Whenever someone in the office takes care of a voicemail, we just delete it so that everybody else knows it's already been handled. So when the doctor and I heard it was just our next patient running late, we instantly deleted it before we went up to the front desk to share the update. Had we known the person was already there, we definitely would have kept it and replayed it." Another person asks, "Wait, why wouldn't the front desk be answering phones and then deleting the voicemail? Why is the doctor telling the front desk that the patient's going to be late? It feels backwards." OP responds with, "It's a small, old-school mom-and-pop office. There's only one person at the front, so if they were in the bathroom, or maybe on another call, or even assisting another patient, the call would have gone to voicemail. The phone that was in the doctor's office was the one with the voicemail machine. Of course, it is the front desk's job to check messages, but we happened to be sitting back there and were able to hear the recording as the person was leaving it in real time. Doctor was also never above doing any job if it meant helping out the team." A few years ago, I was driving home to Denver from my sister's house that's about 2 hours away. I had work at 6 a.m., and I left my sister's house at 10 p.m., which is way later than I meant to leave, so I should have been home right around midnight. I got my 2 kids in the car, and we started driving north on I-25 to Denver. It's a drive I've done dozens, maybe hundreds of times, and it's a drive that I still currently drive to this day. It takes about 30 minutes to get to Colorado Springs from Pueblo, and I looked down just for a quick second to check the time, which said it was exactly 10:30 p.m., and then I looked up to see a blinding light, this whitish, yellowish color in my rearview mirror, and I squinted my eyes because it made it really hard to see. And the next thing I knew, I took a right turn, and I was right in front of my place in Denver. I don't remember ever driving past Colorado Springs or any of the drive for the rest of the way home. I was shaking and scared, and I looked at my cell phone, and it said it was 10:30 p.m., and the radio on my car said the same thing as well. Even my daughter said, "Mommy, how are we home already? That was fast." I called my sister because I'm freaking out at this point. I don't know what happened or how we got home so quick, and I guess I just wanted to double check what time it was when we left. And she said, "Seriously? You left my house like 30 minutes ago. It's now 10:33 p.m. And she's like, No, quit messing with me. There's no way that you made a 2-hour drive in 30 minutes. I don't know, man. I'm still so confused about this time glitch. And my gas tank, by the way, I double-checked that as well. It's still pretty much full, but it should have been almost empty. That drive from Pueblo to Denver is pretty rough on my gas tank. I can't explain any of this. I try not to drive late on Interstate 25 anymore. Now, what's really crazy is that it happened a few more times since then. I can't figure this out. But I am dying to know. Has anyone else ever driven on I-25 in Colorado and had this happen to you? What do you think happened? A couple of years ago, I received a package in the mail from a friend, and it included 4 bracelets with each one containing a single word, to read in total, "The Tortured Poets Department." Later, that same day, I went to wash my face and I took all 4 of those bracelets off. One of them snapped immediately, and then beads went all over the place. I found all of the non-word beads, but I couldn't find a single letter of tortured. 8 beads were still totally missing. That's 1 bead for each letter. Still, never to be found. There is literally nowhere they could have gone and me not be able to find them. It happened in the smallest bathroom that you can imagine, with the door closed. I mean, come on. There's only so places those beads could have gone. I've wondered about this ever since it happened. I saw a post yesterday that mentioned something about a glitch in the Matrix, and then I decided to do some research and look into what that really means. And I read a couple of stories from the subreddit, and a lot of them sound exactly like what happened to me. But why? Nothing changed after that moment, and I didn't feel any differently, except for being a little weirded out and upset that it happened in the first place. Does anyone have any idea what this means? I've been so curious and honestly kind of desperate to know why this happened. Thank you to anybody in advance that has any insight whatsoever. So I was at the grocery store about 7 months ago, and I had just began to walk down an aisle. There was a woman, maybe around 65 years old, in front of me, and she was just shuffling along, looking very depressed and staring at the ground just ahead of her feet. In front of her was a father and a daughter. Dad was probably in his 40s, and the little girl was between 2 and 3. It's my best guess. The little girl was inside the grocery cart standing up, and the dad was pushing her along. I was looking at the dad and the girl for a few seconds, and I was looking in their general direction because I was trying to see if the store had the type of bread that I was looking for. They didn't, by the way. They only have it in stock like 30% of the time. Anyway, suddenly the little girl just rapidly starts pointing at something slightly ahead of them, seemingly above and to her left on top of the bread aisle, and a loaf of bread just rockets itself off of the aisle and into the middle of the floor. My jaw drops, and I can feel my eyes get really big when I see this, and I freeze. I stop dead in my tracks. The father immediately looks behind him at the lady between us. Just briefly, she wasn't paying any attention. She was still looking at the floor. And then quickly his gaze meets my stunned face and he says, "No way, that bread just flew off the shelf." And then he quickly goes around the cart and he picks up the bread and he puts it back. Then he gives me this nervous, rushed smile and then hurriedly disappears down a different aisle. I stood there just dumbfounded. I mean, I didn't know what else to do until I was awakened out of my stupor by the sound of a cart rolling up behind me, and then I eventually just went back to my shopping. But not before I texted a couple of close family members about what I had just witnessed, and I also went to check and make sure that there wasn't something capable of pushing that bread into the aisle like that. There was nothing there besides more bread, and there was a metal divider between the aisles, so it's not like something could have come from the other side of the aisle and pushed it from the back end. Now, I imagine two things might have happened. Either that little girl pulled a Matilda or an 11, depending on your generation, I guess, and force-pushed the bread with her mind off of the shelf, or she was pointing at something else that pushed the bread off. I don't know, and honestly, I get chills when I even think about it. This was the first and really only time I'd seen anything like this, and I've seen some strange stuff, but this most certainly takes the cake, for sure. Now, one thing I might add is that I noticed the dad was definitely not as surprised as he should have been. Maybe that suggests that he's seen this before, and he was doing his best to de-escalate the situation as quickly and as quietly as possible. Let me know what you think, and if anything similar has ever happened to you, please share. And by the way, I did consider going to management and asking to see the footage, because there's no way there was less than half a dozen cameras pointed in that general direction. But, I couldn't really figure out what the heck I was going to say without sounding like a crazy person and possibly getting thrown out by security. This just happened to me on my way home from work today. Hopefully I can explain this in a way that makes sense. I was driving on a 2-lane highway, and I was in the left lane. I see this bright yellow car come up behind me and was tailgating me, but I couldn't go any faster, even though I wanted to, because there was another car in front of me. I was looking at the yellow car in my rearview mirror, annoyed that they were riding me so freaking close, and as I was looking at them, they started to merge into the right lane, I assumed so that they could pass us. They eventually entered my blind spot just to the back right of me, and they stayed there. They never came out of my blind spot. A little bit confused and kind of wondering what they were doing, I turned my head to look and see that they were completely gone. There was now nobody behind me or beside me or in front of me, other than the car that was in front of me the whole time. That little yellow car was completely gone. Also, my car has those sensors on the mirrors that light up when somebody's beside you, and they never triggered. And I'm telling you, this was a bright yellow car in the middle of the day. There was absolutely nowhere they could have gone. There was a steep cliff to the right side of the street and a concrete median along the left lane. I kept looking in my rearview mirror for the next several miles in complete disbelief, but there was no yellow car anywhere. And this is what makes me wish that I really had a rear-facing dash cam. This next story was submitted directly to me from somebody named Mary. She says, "Hi Derek, my glitches happened in a span of 1 week. On the first day, at my restaurant on a slow day, I went outside to vape. We have flyers posted on our windows for local happenings. I'm looking at one of the flyers, and it just happens to be right in the middle of the front window closest to the entrance, and it was the only flyer on the window. After vaping, I go back inside, and in the next hour, maybe only 2 customers came in, and then I went back outside to take another break and hit the vape again. I was looking towards the entrance, and I see the only flyer that was in the middle of that front window was now in the lower left corner. I didn't see anybody move them, and nobody would have. I was so weird, that was the first thing that I noticed. Another instance of a potential glitch in the Matrix happened 2 days later, and also at the restaurant. I was just about to take a customer's order when suddenly I had to tend to what was in the fryers, so I put the pen that I was using down on the desk. When I was done, I went to grab the pen and then take the customer's order, but the pen wasn't where I put it. It wasn't anywhere that I looked. About half an hour later, I was handling some cash, and I pulled up the till drawer for something underneath, and there was the pen. I was the only person in the till, and I know I didn't put it there. Again, nobody would have put that pen under the till. It just appeared. The third glitch happened that same day, at the same place, the restaurant, about 2 hours later. I was stocking some sauce cups, and when I went back to get a pack of them, the wrapping broke and the sauce cups went falling and crashing all onto the floor. So I picked them all up, cleaned up all the broken pieces, and continued stocking them. About 45 minutes later, and after going in and out of the kitchen multiple times during that 40 minutes, I went to fill sauces, and when I was standing in front of the fridge, a sauce cup fell onto the floor by my feet. I have no idea where it came from because it wasn't on me or on the refrigerator. When the sauce cups fell earlier, they fell on the floor, and I picked them all up. I have no idea where that one sauce cup had came from. Thank you, Mary, for sending those to me. It's clear that you work at a very glitchy restaurant. Here's another email submission, this one from Gerald. He says, I just turned 40 and I had a relatively healthy and active lifestyle. I ate right, I worked out 5 times a week, and I had a busy schedule at work as a very busy hairstylist. Looking back, in hindsight, I'd already started to get subtle symptoms of an illness onset, but at the time, I didn't know what it was. Prior to turning 40 in the past 5 years, I would get these subtle symptoms like a flash fever that would last just a few moments and then go away, or some chronic low-grade headaches and feeling super fatigued. I would also have short bouts of feeling dizzy, and all of these things occurred so randomly. So I just chalked it up to lack of sleep, maybe being busy at work, and then it started to affect my vision, and I started seeing these weird auras. I still didn't think anything was wrong with me, though. It was early September of 2010, and I remember this day like it happened yesterday. I got up from bed, and I was just so winded that I had to sit on the edge of my bed to catch my breath. It was a mixture of that and feeling dizzy at the same time. Eventually, I get my energy up, and I get ready for work. I made my lunch, I packed my computer, and off I went to the car as my partner was driving me to work this morning. So as we were driving, apparently, I passed out a few times, and that's when my partner knew that something was wrong and then decided to not drive me to work, but instead drive me to the local hospital. When we arrived at the hospital emergency room, I was admitted immediately as they checked my heart rate, and it was off the charts. I was dizzy and fatigued, and I didn't realize I had a very gray complexion. I was brought in immediately and was placed in an examination room, and I was told to wait there to see a doctor. Now, at this time, there wasn't much that my partner could do for me in the moment, so he decided to run errands to take care of some stuff during the day. So I waited, and then eventually a doctor came in to examine me. I still remember this doctor that came in. He was African, probably 5'9", about mid-40s, and he wore these large, shiny gold-rimmed glasses, reminiscent of something that you'd see from the 1970s. I thought to myself how unusual that is for someone to be wearing this type of style. I just assumed that that was in fashion again. They were so shiny gold, they were sparkling. Now, even being as sick as I was, I still had my faculties, and it wasn't because the illness was affecting my eyesight either. So he examines me, and to my shock, his hands are ice cold. He goes through all of the medical rounds, and he tells me not to worry and that everything will be okay. Then he leaves the room, and I never see him again. I was then admitted to the hospital where I stayed for almost 2 months before being diagnosed with a rare form of B-cell lymphoma. After doing some research, I learned that only 2% of diagnosed cases survive this type of cancer, and come to find out, I was already in stage 4. After going through 3 rounds of chemo, and this was in late December, by the way, it's after Christmas, the chemo didn't work, and I started developing tumors in my abdomen. The oncologist decided to ramp up the chemo, and the dosage would be much higher and more aggressive. So aggressive with the first treatment that I lost all feeling in my legs and hands and arms, and I could no longer walk without any assistance or using a walker. I was told that I would never be able to do hair again, and that I would be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. And I was also told that if this more aggressive chemo didn't work, I would have about a month to live. I accepted this as my fate. I mean, what else can you do when a doctor looks you in the eye and tells you this, just straightforward? It was then that I had a spiritual awakening and accepted my fate. Now, I do believe in miracles, and within about a week, the tumors in my abdomen were gone. So I continued with this second series of aggressive chemotherapy, and by the end of my chemotherapy at the hospital, I found out I was fast-tracked to get a bone marrow transplant at a different hospital. So, sooner than later, the time comes for me to transfer to the new hospital where they have this extensive bone marrow transplant center. However, prior to being transferred, I spoke with the head nurse of the floor, as I wanted to give thanks for those that took really great care of me. I asked the nurse if I could speak to the African doctor that saw me in the emergency department when I first got there. As she had worked at this hospital for more than 30 plus years, she looked at me with this puzzled look on her face. She knew everybody in the ER, and she told me that there was no such person working there. I didn't know what to think. Was I visited by an angel? Was this person a ghost? Now, whatever it was, or whoever they were, they visited me in this physical form. He touched my wrist, and he checked my pulse. I remember feeling how cold his hands were. I was shocked and amazed. Honestly, I didn't know what to do. After my bone marrow transplant, it was a success, and I ended up beating stage 4 rare lymphoma, and I'm now in full remission. Looking back now, the apparition that showed itself to me said that I would be okay and told me not to worry. I always knew from that incident that this was going to be the hardest thing that I would ever go through, but I also felt comfortable in knowing that I wasn't going to die. I beat a stage 4 rare form of lymphoma, and I'm now in full remission, and I don't use a wheelchair, and my hands and legs are now usable, and I've even gone back to work. I have 3 kids, and as soon as they were old enough to talk, I started asking them if they remembered anything from before they came to me. With the first 2, I got nothing. I asked my 3-year-old this question the other day as we were driving home from preschool, and she says, when I was a grown-up before, I was in a tree and I came down. I didn't pay much attention because I thought she was just looking at trees outside the window and making things up. And the other day, my husband told me what she said. When I was a grown-up before, I fell out of a tree onto a sidewalk. I was mad at the sidewalk and the house. And I thought that was interesting because it aligned with what she told me just a few days prior. Currently, I am pregnant, and she is fascinated with the baby in my belly. This morning, she started telling me about how when she was in there, it was nice and warm, and she felt safe. She also seems to talk to her deceased grandmother, who died shortly after she was born, and my deceased grandfather, who I was quite close to. She says, "Pawpaw is a nice man. He sings to me." There's no one else in our life that we call Pawpaw, and he did love to sing. He died in 2017. I cannot wait to ask her more questions. In addition, my 19-year-old daughter had a dream that a little girl was talking to her. The little girl said that she used to live nearby, but she decided that she didn't want to live anymore. She's coming back, and she wants my daughter to show her around. I am pregnant with a baby girl, and my 19-year-old daughter that just told me this has always had psychic tendencies, as do I. Her and I both think the dream was her baby sister communicating. I recently started listening to a past life regression hypnosis meditation on YouTube, and while most times I've fallen asleep before getting to the good part, the one time that I did make it through, the result really surprised me. I saw that I was a young woman, maybe 15 to 17 years old, and I was wearing a pale green and white embroidered dress, surrounded by farmland and grassy plains. I worked hard at tending to our farm animals. I remember chickens, geese, pigs, and also threshing the grain field by hand. I saw my mother at the end of the field wipe sweat from her face. I think we were tired, but we were still very happy and very proud. The next scene was of my family. Everyone was emaciated, and they were sitting in dim candlelight with bowls of watery broth. The local farms were destroyed. I couldn't tell exactly, but my impression was that it was a result of ongoing poor weather, like a long drought rather than an attack or anything malicious or sinister. We died of starvation, too weak to even leave in the end. I find this interesting because although I grew up with stable food security, I have had a not-so-great relationship with food, and because of that, I am a bit overweight. I crave calorie-dense options, and I have this feeling of satisfaction anytime I sneak food that I think I shouldn't have, even though, as an adult, I'm not actually sneaking it from anybody. And I get possessive over food sometimes too, especially food that I've bought for myself. Like, for example, I really resent my husband sometimes when he eats what I perceive as mine, even when I didn't explicitly state that I got whatever it was for myself. And I know that's hypocritical when reflected against my sneaking. Doing this past life regression really shook me. I was skeptical going in, more so just doing it for fun, and I don't know. Maybe I did make it all up, but it still felt like an unexpected aha moment that answered questions I haven't been able to figure out in literal years of therapy. What do you guys think? I wanted to share something that happened about a year ago. I had this vision of a past life during a meditation session. At first, I figured it was just my imagination, but It all came to me so fluidly and out of nowhere that I realized there's no way I could have just made the whole thing up. I sometimes ask myself questions during meditation, and this time the main question that I asked myself was, why does my throat always feel so tight? The answers that came to me were really intense. I saw that I used to be a woman from Madagascar. That's also my origin, but I'm not born there. I was some kind of healer of souls. I'm not 100% sure what that mission involved, but what that does mean is that that was my role. Maybe you have an idea, you could fill me in. Anyway, I was seen as a witch. A group of women ended up kidnapping me, locking me in a room, tying me up, and then beating me. In the end, they killed me by, well, I don't want to get too graphic here, but let's just say I have a good reason for now why my throat feels so tight in this life. The crazy thing is, I didn't die feeling afraid. Not at all. I was actually proud of who I was. I was the kind of woman who would never hide her abilities. What makes me really believe that this was a past life is the feeling that I get now. Whenever I say her name in my head, or try to connect with her, I'm hit with this insane wave of confidence that I've never felt in my life before. It kind of feels like invincibility. It gives me the strength to stand tall and own the fact that I do shiatsu, even when people are skeptical or call it pseudoscience, or they think I'm a charlatan, what have you. My voice feels steady and powerful when I think of her name. It honestly feels like I've reactivated something deep inside me. It also kind of explains why I've always felt a bit uneasy around other women, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'm just losing it. Who knows? But either way, it's been a huge boost for me, and it's not hurting anybody. It's just this wild, powerful sensation and this truly eye-opening image of what I used to be in a past life. I feel a very deep longing for my husband from my past life, and it's gotten even stronger since I've seen him in my past life regression. I remembered us living in the 1800s in Scotland. I don't know exactly when or where. He treated me perfectly, especially when you think about the fact that women hadn't been treated that well back then. But he was different. We respected each other, and we had a very deep bond. I haven't found anything like that in this current life yet, and I feel like I don't fit in this time and place that I'm in right now, which is in modern-day Germany. I feel like no one around me sees or understands me, and I feel like I'm stuck in a life, like I'm being exiled or forced into a prison cell, forced to be without him. A year ago, I traveled to Scotland, and the moment that my foot touched the ground, I instantly felt this strong energy of pure happiness. I can't even describe it. It was like I was home. And mind you, this was before I did the regression hypnosis, so at the time, I had no idea why I felt this way. In one of my few sessions that I've had recently, I remember this. We were in a building, maybe an authority building or something like that, something institutional. I was sitting in a hallway on a chair, waiting for him. A door opened and he walked out of that room, and to me, he looked sad. We looked at each other, and neither one of us said a word. We both went home just feeling depressed. I had a feeling that he had received some bad news, but I have no clue what about. The last day in this life, I saw us walking hand in hand through a city. It was kind of dark and kind of smoky. I remember this big industrial chimney that had smoke billowing out of it. And although I know in my heart that this was our last day together in this life, I still haven't been shown our deaths. I know that he's somewhere out there in this life and in this world, and I just want to find him. I know it sounds ridiculous, but has anyone experienced anything similar? Or does anyone know how to find a lover from your past life? We have a little bit of back and forth in the comments. Somebody says, "This is so beautiful. I hope you find him, but I also hope you know that not all past lives, soulmates/partners are meant to be with each other in every lifetime. He may not have even reincarnated, and there could also be a huge age gap." About a week ago, I did a past life regression after seeing it on TikTok. During the first bit, I remembered a childhood memory. One I remember fondly and often, as it's one of the rare memories that my little sister and dad were happy. My first day of school at 4 years old. However, I was able to remember more. A small bit of the bus ride to school and then the walk down the hallway to my class. I then was taken into a past life. I was a woman in her 20s or 30s, I couldn't tell. It was very obvious that it was the 1960s. The woman that I saw, who was me, was a very put-together housewife, one of the few that was happy with that kind of lifestyle. I recognized her husband, not as him in that time, but actually from today. A man that I have no business being in love with, but in this past life regression, I am. At least, this man looks exactly like him. However, in the past life, he was much more put together and far more accomplished. Then, it flashed me forward to the 1980s. Her husband is in a hospital bed, dying of cancer, while promising her the opposite is happening. When it brought me to her death, it was very clear that it wasn't long at all after he had passed. I quickly learned that she had decided to end her life on her own by way of knife. And I saw her do it in the exact spot that I burned my stomach earlier in my life and now have a scar. Then, later towards this session, the advice segment, it was this blue woman, almost an aura, telling me to wait for him to grow up. Ever since this experience, I've been completely exhausted. One day this week, I slept for close to 24 hours. The rest of the days, I slept for 12 hours a night. I've never felt this drained and exhausted before. What do I do? Do you think this is the regression trying to tell me something? I've got a bit more context. My second biggest fear in life is my spouse dying, especially right in front of me. This is such a big fear that I've told my friends that if it happens to me, to dig 2 graves, because I too will be going shortly after that. My mom used to tell me that the way you died in a past life is your biggest ailment now. And I do have a rare autoimmune disease in my throat that affects my entire GI system, especially my stomach, because I can't digest past the stomach during flare-ups. This man that I know today that I'm in love with is older. He's 7 years older. He's not a young man to the point where grow up means just wait for him to mature. I'm starting to think that it's more so guiding me and talking about his priorities in life, such as he needs to prioritize his children and finalize his divorce. Somebody in the comments asks a question. They say, when you feel that deep exhaustion, can you feel where in your body the heaviness is most strong? Is it in your stomach area where the scar is? And the OP responds with, yes, actually, the heaviness is where the scar is. I occasionally will get phantom pains there too, and it's far worse than the simple burn that caused it. My GI system is a mess all around. It's 2:35 in the morning, and I just did a past life regression led by Brian Weiss. Earlier today, I came across it on TikTok and decided, hey, why not? And I am beyond words. I've never experienced anything like this. I started off being guided into a sense of extreme calmness, and I started seeing textures again, just like when I was younger. Extreme, swollen, white smoothness followed by harsh, sickening wrinkles. I was then told to imagine a garden and then a childhood memory. I saw, in third person, the jousting tournament in the medieval festival at Fort Tryon Park. I saw my mom in a green and white blouse, and I was wearing a pink satin dress. It was very warm outside, and some sweat was gathering on my shoulders. My neck was also very hot from being covered with my hair, and I remember being so impressed and surprised and excited about watching these men compete in their joust. There was, precisely, a red and white jouster and a yellow jouster with a black knight and a horse emblem on a yellow piece of cloth. And I remember thinking that I really wished that my grandma could see this. I was next guided even further back in time. It was in utero. The womb was warm and it glowed this soft orange color. It felt like seeing the sun shine through your eyelids when they're closed. There were a lot of veins and capillaries, and I sensed like I was too large for this small space. I felt really suffocated in that moment, and I couldn't breathe well. My throat felt like something was clamped around it. I also felt an overwhelming sense of sadness, just a deep, deep feeling of being out of place and being very unhappy. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. And also, I didn't feel loved or worthy. Then, briefly, I experienced birth. Many of those sensations went away then. I felt very free, and now I felt loved. I saw, again from the third-person perspective, a memory of my dad holding me while my exhausted yet smiling mother laid propped up in the hospital bed. There was a very yellow sensation around it all. I was then asked the question why I chose these parents, and what came to me was to teach my parents, specifically my father, a lesson. I needed to help them see past themselves, past their own experiences, and I needed to come here to understand that I have a sense of purpose, a will to live that's independent of those around me. What followed was seeing a door to my past life. It was a door surrounded by darkness, but from the door came this vibrant yellow light. As I stepped through, I looked down at my feet, and I had no shoes on. I was dirty, and my clothes felt very itchy. I was standing outside in some type of town. I remember it was filthy, dusty, dilapidated. The houses were poorly made, scrap metal shacks, and I was standing at the base of a slight hill. I saw this red-haired, freckled boy run past me, and then I looked down and I saw my hands. I was a man, and I had big square hands and white hairy arms. My nails were dirty and awful, and I suddenly felt this deep sense of uselessness and emptiness. I felt like I had no future, no purpose, no worth. Then the guide told me to go back to my most important memory. I went back to a memory where I instantly knew my son, my young boy, was dying. I'm still not sure how, but it felt like something was happening that was just out of my control. He had a swollen belly and these gaunt arms, and I remember being on my knees while my mother reached out for me. She was large and short and old and was wearing the same clothes that I was, but hers seemed to have more color to them. Then I was shown my death. Again, I felt this overwhelming sense of uselessness and deep sadness. But at the same time, what was happening felt inevitable. I don't want to be too vivid here, but I'll paint the picture just enough to where you get it. I was standing in the middle of a room on a stool with a rope above me. I died inside of that house, and as I was told to zoom out of that scene, I got to see what I look like. I got to see who I was. I was an ordinary bearded man, just swinging. Finally, I was told that a spiritual guide had a message for me. I saw my form as a shapeless mass of light blue, and I saw another such form as well. I instantly could tell that that was my grandma. I've noticed that all of my memories of myself are in third person, and so was this experience, except for my experience as my past life in my time in utero. But I saw my grandma, and while I was hugging her, for some reason I just kept seeing her as black and white, like an old photo before color. I started crying hysterically, and then she hugged me in a very specific way. My head was pressed to her chest, and she held my face with both of her arms. She told me that I had to find a reason to live for myself. I embraced her for so long, and for some reason, I was asking her for forgiveness and telling her how much I wanted to be with her. But I knew it was time to go. I got a feeling, though, that I would see her soon, and then I started crying even more. I walked away while waving goodbye. I was then guided into waking back up, but I felt so shocked and unsettled by what happened. I don't know what's true, or even if anything is. I don't even know how to feel about this. I still wonder if the textures that I saw tonight, the ones that I've been seeing since I was a child, mean anything. And I also wonder if I'm actually going to see my grandma soon. Have you ever felt like this? If you've ever done a past life regression session, what was your first experience like? I'm new to this, and I would love to hear anybody's thoughts. Hi all. This is my first time on this forum, and I just wanted to share my experience with remembering one of my past lives that's now been confirmed by a medium who I trust. Basically, around 3 years ago, I started getting really into Japanese music. Any type, really. All I knew is that it made me very happy to listen to it, and I loved how the language sounds too. There were some songs that I listened to that resonated with me on such a deep level that I can't even explain. Around a year later, I started becoming more spiritual and opening up to the idea that reincarnation is real. I had just come out of a fundamentalist Christian religion, and I was realizing that there is so much more to life than we are taught to understand. One day, around that time, I had a sudden, random inkling that I maybe loved Japanese music and culture for a reason, more than just being a weeb or a Japanese fanatic. I started tapping more into that feeling, and as I did, images and what seemed like detached memories started flooding my mind. Suddenly, I knew without a doubt that I did in fact live in Japan at one point, and specifically, Hiroshima and Nagasaki came into mind. I felt as if I'd probably passed when one of those bombs were dropped, but the feeling scared me a little bit, tapping into those memories scared me. So I stopped right there. I didn't want to go any further with it. For a long time, I held those feelings deep inside me because I had no one to talk to about it who I thought would understand. I thought that if I told anybody, they would think I'm a total whack job. I could barely even believe it myself, but deep down, I somehow knew it was still true. Fast forward to today. I just had my first ever session with a medium, and we talked about a lot of random things that I've been wondering about for a long time. At some point, my questions about my past life came up, and I asked if I did indeed live in Japan and whether I died in the bombings or not. On their end, it was a very strong yes for both questions, and we both immediately got chills up and down our spines. It was surreal to have those suspicions be confirmed, especially because I knew years before that that was the case. And now that I'm tapping even farther into those memories, I'm starting to remember other things as well. Like, for example, I was a male, and I loved that lifetime so deeply, and I must have been so very happy before, well, that happened. I could feel that it was a very tragic experience, and the funny thing is, it explains a lot about who I am today. I never thought I could know something like this about myself. I think, for me, knowing my past life will help bring a lot of healing to my current lifetime, as I'm pretty sure I still harbor a lot of pain from those experiences. I just think it's so fascinating how everything works, and I'm still acclimating to the spiritual side of things as I open my mind to these possibilities. And I'm also curious, what past lives do you guys remember? Is there anybody else reading this or hearing this that's had a past life in Japan as well? I just wanted to share a recent past life regression experience and also see whether anyone else has experienced anything like what I did. Long story short, this summer, after 30 years, I was finally validated by a sibling about the abuse that we suffered as children, which led me down IFS, visualization, somatic healing, and hypnosis as healing modalities. My entire back from top to bottom has been sore and achy for my whole life. I was listening to one of Michael Seeley's past life regression videos, which led me through a life, and the culminating scene ended in me noticing the fabric of my dress. Looking up at a row of pine trees, I could feel the wind, and I could feel the earth under my feet, and then I had a feeling like, oh, I remember this. Oh, this is gonna be bad. But I didn't feel any physical pain. I just watched as a small sword or metal weapon came through my chest from my back and out of my front, and I thought, oh, here we go again. And then it felt like I got swooped up and backwards from my belly button. I emerged from the meditation very calm, but still energetic. I was centered, but I was excited that I've now experienced multiple personality important regressions. Well, fast forward to about 2 weeks from there, and I could now physically feel a localized radiating spot on my back and my chest where this sword or this metal weapon came through. So, I asked my partner if he could help me remove the sword since I can't reach it or see it myself. He agreed, and then we meditated together, and I was shocked that he immediately sensed where the spot was and then made a diamond mudra over the spot and lifted the blade by the hilt and then filled the space with blue and white light. This whole meditation that we did together took about an hour, and he was able to describe what it looked like to me, and then he mentally buried it somewhere in the astral plane for me. When I stood up, I stretched my back, and a vertebrae in that exact spot shifted, and then I felt instant relief. It's been 6 days since we removed that sword from my back, and truly, I still have not felt the same pain there as I have been for my entire life. But now, I can't help but have this nagging thought, this question of, who put that there and why? Do I release that thought too? Or do you think it's important to explore that further? Anyway, the There's not many people in my life who I feel like I can share this with, but it's just been really meaningful to me, and I thought that you might at least find this interesting. I've been interested in past life regression for about 3 years. I've been reading a lot of Dolores Cannon, Brian Weiss, and Michael Newton. I've had a really difficult life, and it's given me a lot of hope that I chose to live like this and to learn from these experiences. I've been worried about doing a proper regression. I've tried in the past, but I didn't really get anything. But I remembered a couple of memories that I had when I was a toddler that I guess could have been attributed to my past life memories, so I just tried to focus on those. From what I can recall, I can picture a DMV. I don't know how I know it was a DMV, but it was just clear to me. I also remember a police car, a radio station, and a small town, maybe in the Colorado Rockies somewhere. I can also picture a house on a snowy mountain, and I can picture me and maybe someone else sledding down. However, this memory is, again, something that I had as a child and has only just resurfaced, so I don't know if it's something I came up with. When I was younger, I had a CD with the song Big Rock Candy Mountains on it, and that song kind of felt familiar to me when I was younger, and I've also grown up to love classic country music just like it. I can estimate that this time was around the 50s or 60s, which would make sense as one of my biggest interests in the 50s, particularly in relation to the atomic age and the Manhattan Project. I live in the UK, however, I'm incredibly drawn to the southwestern United States, so I wonder if that's another clue that I did live somewhere like Colorado. I feel very close with my guides, or at least I hope I am. I tried to do a communicating session with them, and I felt that one told me her name was Javi. Then she told me to look up the meaning. I did, and it turns out Javi means High One, and it's seen as a spiritual gift in Sanskrit, which is a language, thanks to my interest in Robert Oppenheimer, I'm very drawn to. Also, I saw it was another name for Odin, but I don't know. I'm not very interested in Norse paganism, nor do I feel very connected to it, so I don't know how much significance that has. However, I tried a session yesterday. I really like Brian Weiss, so I tried his session, and I don't know, honestly it felt a lot fuzzier than I thought it would. In a way, it felt like I was just sort of making it up as I went along. I cried during some bits, but I had a difficult day and was tired, so I thought it might have just been that. During this Brian Weiss-led regression session, I seemed to be a woman in the 1950s whose brother died. However, I have no idea if that's what happened. My intuition was telling me that I was still missing something. I tried to piece together feelings from this life. I tried to connect it to my trauma and my depression, and I thought that in that life, I drove myself crazy trying to discover the person who killed my brother, hence the police cars and perhaps the being on the radio bit. I pictured myself finding out about his death in the DMV, so perhaps it was a car crash that he experienced during his driving test, but still, I don't know, I can't be too sure. Towards the end of this session, when I was shown how I died in the past life, it was pretty morbid. I did it to myself. But I don't know, man, I'm still just so unsure. And I ended up crying in real life in the end, but I didn't know where the emotion was coming from or if it was just some sort of emotional placebo or something. I know that lots of people recognize people from their current lifetimes in their past ones. I even have a friend who feels just like my brother, so I thought maybe it was him. But I don't think I'll ever know. I might try again, but my knowledge just feels so limited. I feel like there's so many unopened doors or unexplored avenues that I could go. I don't even know where to start. This is an experience that I've never shared with anybody except for my brother. When I was about 13 years old, I was living in rural British Columbia, and one winter night, I was sitting in the hot tub on the deck just outside our house, just watching the woods and enjoying the silence. We had recently had a snowfall, and the snow was about knee-deep. It was about 2 or maybe 3 in the morning when out of nowhere, a very large wolf steps out of the woods. It was bigger than any wolf I had ever seen before, by far. I remember its coat as well. It was this shimmering silver, and it had these bright, piercing green eyes as well. The wolf begins walking along the fence of our paddocks, and as it did, it locked eyes with me. For a moment, we just stared at each other while it continued to walk past. Both of us were alone, in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere. What happened next still sends shivers down my spine just from the thought of it. After it passed me, the wolf walks towards our barn, where we keep the horses, and as it entered the barn, it became darker inside. But the far side of the barn was still brightly lit by a light outside. From where I was sitting, I could clearly see the opening on the other side of the barn. As the wolf walked through the barn, about halfway across, something impossible happened. The shape of the wolf started changing. It shifted from a wolf form into the shape of this very large, broad-shouldered person. The horses didn't make a single sound. The figure, which is now standing roughly 7 feet tall, rounded the corner toward the open field on the other side of the barn, but it never emerged. I waited, expecting to see it come out of the other side, but it never did. And I never saw it again. My brother has had his own encounter with what I believe was the same wolf, or maybe it was a shapeshifter. One night, he woke up suddenly with a strange feeling that he was being watched. When he looked out of his window, he saw a very large wolf walking away from the house. He also told me that he had this strong impression that whatever that thing was had been standing there for a while, watching him while he slept. The property that we lived on has a strange history as well. It was old, native ground, and our barn had once been a small schoolhouse where a Catholic priest taught native children about Christianity. When we moved in, the old desks and the chairs were still inside. A lot of strange things happened there. My brother and I both saw children's faces in the window panes of that barn. Lights would also turn on and off randomly. Closet doors would slam over and over again for minutes at a time. We would hear footsteps, and then there was always this unsettling feeling of just being looked at. One night in my room, I remember seeing glowing red eyes up on the ceiling, and I forced myself to hide under my covers until morning. But, the reason that I'm sharing this story now, after all these years, is that I'm looking for answers. What did I encounter that night outside? I've tried looking into it myself. The closest things that I could find were, stories about skinwalkers or wendigos. But from what I've read, those creatures are usually described as having distorted or unnatural features, like there was something obviously wrong or horrific about them. But what I saw didn't feel like those things. The wolf looked completely normal. Aside from how big it was, right up until the moment it changed shape in front of me. I know the story's a bit long, and sorry if I'm rambling. I'm not the best storyteller. I also understand that the term skinwalker comes from Navajo lore and doesn't really connect with tribes in British Columbia, where this happened. I only use that word because it's the closest comparison that I could find to describe what I saw. But you know what? Whatever that was, I've never forgotten it, and it's safe to say I never will. This happened in July of 2025. My girlfriend and I had rented a small cabin in Hocking Hills, Ohio for a few days. If you've never been there, it's a really beautiful area. Rolling hills, dense forests, and these long, winding roads that seem to twist through the woods forever. There are no big cities nearby, there's barely any streetlights, and at night, the darkness is pretty much all you can see. That's actually why we were there. Earlier that evening, we had visited one of the local dark sky parks. The whole purpose of the park is to get away from light pollution so that you can see the stars clearly. And it worked. The sky out there was incredible. We stayed there for a while, just lying back and looking up. Eventually, though, it started getting late. So we packed up and began the drive back to the cabin. Driving at night in Hocking Hills is, well, an experience. The roads curve constantly. There are sharp turns, steep hills, and there's thick woods on both sides. When your headlights are the only source, it almost feels like you're driving through a tunnel of trees. Every time you come over a hill or around a bend, you have no idea what's going to be there. And that's exactly why this story exists. It was quiet in the car. My girlfriend and I were just talking about the stars that we had seen and how surprisingly peaceful the park had been. Eventually, we started approaching the main small town in the area. It's tiny. There's just a handful of buildings. There's a few shops and an old church that sits near the road. As we came up over a small hill heading toward the town, something appears in my headlights. And it startled me so badly, I almost yelled. Right there in the middle of the road, directly in front of the old church, was what looked like an elderly woman. She was slightly bent over, like she had been picking up or maybe catching her breath. I immediately slam on the brakes, and then the car lurches to a stop, and I can hear the tires crunching on the pavement beneath me. And for a split second, I have this rush of thoughts all at once. I ask myself, God, did she fall? Does she need help? Why is she standing there in the middle of the road at night? And then she stands up all the way and she starts waving at us. Her arm is raised above her head, moving side to side like someone trying to flag down a car or maybe asked for help. I remember thinking, we have to pull over. But then something happened that I still cannot explain. As I watched her waving arm and the headlights, it changed. Her arm and hand seemed to shapeshift. And then, in what felt like one smooth motion, her arm and hand seemed to morph into the head of a deer. And within just seconds, the entire figure in the road that was just what I thought was an elderly woman bent over was now no longer a woman. It now looked like a fully grown adult deer, big antlers and everything. Its eyes caught the reflection of my headlights and then flashed brightly back at me, and then it bolted in the other direction. It ran off the side of the road and then disappeared straight into the woods. Gosh, the whole thing probably lasted less than 5 seconds, but in the moment, it felt like I was watching time just stretch out. So now I'm just sitting there, gripping the steering wheel. I can feel my heart pounding. And my first thought was that my eyes had just tricked me somehow. Maybe the lighting was weird. Maybe it was a deer the whole time and then my brain just filled in the rest. But before I could say anything, my girlfriend turns to me and she looks incredibly pale, totally shaken, and she says, "Did you see that lady in the road? What was that?" And then me just hearing her say that made my stomach drop all the way to the bottom of my feet, because that meant it wasn't just me that saw the old lady at first. She saw the same thing. She saw the woman standing in the road, she saw her wave for help. Her and I both now just sit there for a few seconds trying to process what we had just witnessed. And then eventually, I ease the car forward and we keep driving. Neither of us said much for the rest of the trip, and since that night, I've tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just some kind of strange optical illusion, with the shadows and the headlights and the movement or whatever. Maybe our brains both misinterpreted the same incorrect thing at the same time. But, the part that bothers me the most even today is that we both saw the exact same thing. Has anyone else ever experienced anything like this before? We get a couple of interesting comments underneath the story. One person replies, "Man, I've been wanting to go to more dark sky parks to practice my astrophotography, but crap like this makes me scared to go alone. It's weird that the entity would wave in distress and then shapeshift before you could even react. Maybe the wave was actually her physically morphing into the deer and not trying to lure you in." We actually get a reply from the OP's girlfriend. She says, "Hey, I'm the girlfriend. The thing that made the sighting unsettling for me was the feeling I got upon seeing her. It was almost as if I was in danger. Even though she was this elderly woman in the middle of the road at night, obviously in more danger than myself. She was just out in the elements. And to add to it, it was also incredibly creepy that it happened in front of one of those old school white chapel churches with the cross on the steeple in the middle of literally nowhere. It was all around unsettling for sure. And as far as the dark sky park, it was fun. Lots of shooting stars that night. I think there were some meteor showers happening around that time of year that we went as well. And for those watching, based on the information given from the girlfriend of this OP, the images you've been seeing throughout the duration of this storytelling is the exact road and the exact church that they were in front of when they saw this happen. This happened to me when I was 14 years old. It was the winter of 2020 in Canada, and it was also during lockdown. At that time, our school schedule was strange. Every 2 days, we would go to the school in person, and then the other days we would have classes online from home. One day, after my online classes had ended, I needed to practice my acting part for theater class. The role involved a lot of yelling and emotional lines, and everyone in my house was home because of the lockdown. I didn't want to bother anyone with all my noise, so I decided to go practice in the woods behind my house. Just for some context, I basically live in the woods. We don't really have neighbors, and the forest behind our house is private property, so people don't walk back there. There is no public trail. Before leaving, I asked my sister if she wanted to join me, and at first, she agreed. But when we stepped outside, she said she suddenly had this really weird feeling. She said she didn't want to go anymore, and then she runs back inside the house. So instead, I brought my dog with me. He's a pug, and at the time, he was about 3 years old. There's one important thing about my dog. He can't bark properly. He's never been able to. Even to this day, when he does it, which is so rare I almost forget he even makes a sound at all, it sounds like he's struggling. He's also incredibly friendly. He loves everybody, and honestly, he's the type of dog who would probably run away happily with a kidnapper. So, I walked down my property and I entered the woods. I know those woods like the back of my hand. I grew up exploring them, and I've never gotten lost there. There's a small path that runs through the trees, and that's the path that I followed with my dog. While I was walking, I started recording myself on my phone so that I could watch the video later, and then just take notes on myself and see what needed to be improved in my acting. And that's when I noticed something. In the video, I saw something behind me. At first, I thought I had to have been imagining it, but then I turned around to check, and there really was something there. To this day, I still don't exactly know what it was. They were covered head to toe in layers of what looked like dirty blankets or old coats. It looked like they had just piled them on top of each other. Whatever this thing was holding a huge black plastic bag as well, like the garbage bags you see in restaurants. I remember that very clearly. And the thing's face was mostly hidden. The only thing I could really see were what I thought were its eyes. In the other hand, it was holding something that looked sharp. I couldn't tell if it was like a knife or a pipe, or maybe it was its own claws, but it definitely looked like some sort of blade or tool. My first instinct was just to walk faster. No one ever comes into these woods, especially not in the middle of winter when it's negative 34 degrees Celsius. But when I tried to keep walking, I could feel my dog stop. He refused to move. He was completely still, just staring at whatever this thing was behind us. And then something happened that shocked me. My dog starts barking. Now, remember, he's never been able to bark, properly at least, and he loves people. But at that moment, he was barking and staring at that thing like he was just terrified of it. That's when I knew something was very wrong. I whistled for the dog to start following me, and then he eventually starts walking again towards me. But he kept his head turned backwards, just watching that thing. And then I heard what sounded like a laugh. As the laugh got louder and more obvious, I heard that thing say something that still sticks with me to this day. They said, "I'm not scared of dogs." It was clear to me that this was a person. And in the moment, I didn't know if that would allow me to be more relieved or more terrified. I remember thinking, why would someone say that to me? I kept walking faster, and I told my dog to stay close, and then I started hearing the snow crunch behind us. The person had started walking faster as well, and they were following me. At that point, panic really sets in. I pick up my dog, and then I just start bolting, and I could hear the stranger running behind me as well. A few seconds later, I reach a dead end. In front of me is this small cliff that's covered in snow. It's probably about 10 feet high. And in that moment, 3 thoughts went through my head, all at the same time. 1, push forward through the trees and hope I find another path. 2, jump off the snow cliff. And 3, turn around and just try to run past the person. And the whole time I had my dog in my arms now too. I didn't have time to think about it, and I could hear the stranger's footsteps getting closer in the snow. So I made the decision. I jumped. I landed in deep snow, and it swallowed me almost completely. In Canada, where we live, snow can pile up to 3 feet deep, and that's exactly what happened here. I sank down into it, and I wasn't wearing a snowsuit. My legs and my hands were freezing instantly, and ice was starting to form on my clothes and on my skin. And for a moment, I thought I might actually die out here. But then my dog starts digging. He digs into the snow around me, and then I could feel myself be able to free up and move again. I picked him up, and then I start running toward another small cliff ahead of us. Before I went over it, I looked back one last time, and I see that stranger again. They were standing on the edge of the first cliff. They had one hand over their forehead, kind of like they were looking across the horizon, trying to find me. And then it did. And then they start moving toward me again. I run as fast as I can. I follow the path that I knew would lead to the street in front of my house, and I ran for several minutes at full speed as fast as I could, with my dog in my arms and ice forming on my body in the freezing cold. Eventually, I make it back to my house. When I got inside, I did probably the dumbest thing you could ever do. I didn't tell anybody. I just went to my room, and I sat there, tried to warm up, and I stared into nothing. The weekend of October 11th, 2024, my friends and I went on a camping trip at Lake Kaganza State Park in Stoughton, Wisconsin. That evening, we were finishing up some geocaching along a hiking trail near the park's outhouses. The trail we were on loops around a prairie in the middle, surrounded by forests on all sides. You enter it by crossing another trail that leads into the woods. When we started the hike, the sun was already low in the sky. It had to be around 6 p.m. By the time we reached our final geocache, the sun had dipped behind the tree line and it was starting to get dark, but not so dark that we needed flashlights yet. This is where things got strange. The forest suddenly goes completely silent. All the bugs that had been buzzing around had stopped. The birds that had been chirping about also went quiet. It was just pure silence. Then we heard a whistle. A sharp, bone-chilling whistle somewhere ahead of us. Our whole group froze, and no one said a word. Then, it happened again. The second whistle sounded a little bit different, though. It was more broken up and a little bit less clean than the first one. By this time, I was a little tipsy, so my first thought was that it had to be a person just trying to whistle. I called out pretty firmly, "Hello?" And a few seconds later, a voice answered. It said, "I thought you were dogs." The voice came from someone walking around the curve in the trail toward us, and when the person passed our group, something immediately felt off. I tried to look at their face, which is something I have been instinctively taught to do since I'm a female who enjoys being outdoors, but I couldn't even make out any facial features. At the time, I chalked it up to nerves and the fading light. Our group agreed that the whole thing was weird, but nobody wanted to panic. We took it as a sign that it was time to go back to the car. But that's when things got even worse. All four of us stayed on a high alert while walking back down the trail. We were checking the woods and looking behind us just in case, and then suddenly, that same figure appears again. It's standing right at the edge of the trail near the woods, and it's completely still. But instead of looking at us, it was staring out into the prairie field to our right. In a flat, dry voice, it said, "Who's that guy?" And none of us stopped walking, we all just kept going. I answered while moving past it, "The same guy from earlier?" I assumed it was talking about my boyfriend, who was walking behind the rest of the group. And then after that, nobody said a word. The walk back to the car was completely silent. We kept checking over our shoulders and scanning the woods the entire time. Eventually, we make it back to the campsite, and since it was already getting late, we decided it would be better to pack everything up in the morning instead of leaving right away. While we sat there, talking about what happened, I mentioned something that had been bothering me. During both of those encounters with this thing or this person that we saw, I couldn't make out a face at all. And then the others agreed. They all said the same thing, and every one of us described this figure in a similar way. We all said it looked like there should have been a face, like you could see where the eyes and the nose and the mouth were supposed to be, but nothing was there. It's like his whole face was just blurred. Because of the whistling and the strange appearance, we started wondering if we had encountered something like a skinwalker. The strange part is, though, that skinwalker stories aren't really associated with this part of Wisconsin. That night at the campsite felt incredibly long. All of us had this constant feeling that we were being watched. I'm a pretty spiritually inclined person, so I took a few steps that I believe helped protect our campsite so that we could actually get some sleep. But I don't know, man, ever since that night, I've had a few other strange experiences too. and I'm still trying to figure out what we really encountered out there. Somebody in the comments asks, there is absolutely no doubt that there is something lurking in those Wisconsin woods, because I have similar stories too. I'm glad that you had brought others with you, or it would be hard for others to believe the story. By the way, you said that you felt watched during the night. Did anyone else in your group feel the same way, or do you think it was just focused on you? And the OP responds with, everyone felt the feeling of being watched from the same direction in the woods the entire night. But since the camping trip, I've had a few different instances that are unexplainable and seem entirely related to the being that I encountered that day. We also had a young child with us as well on the trip, and the thoughts of what could have happened keep me up at night. I've tried to rationalize everything, but honestly, there is no rationalizing. I originally posted this on r/Bigfoot and was recommended to share it here as well. I've been a long-time lurker, and I'm generally open to the idea of Bigfoot and other supernatural things, but I've never posted about anything like this before. That said, I don't actually think what I experienced was a Bigfoot. I'm mostly just trying to figure out what it really might have been. I'm open to suggestions or any other subs that might help, since I'm pretty new to Reddit. Here's my encounter with something that I still cannot explain. This happened about 4 years ago in the small town of Chewelah, Washington. My girlfriend at the time and I planned a long weekend getaway. We rented out a yurt in the middle of nowhere because we both loved nature, and the idea of getting far away from the city sounded like a great time. And honestly, it was. The thing that struck me the most about staying in that yurt was just how dark and quiet it got at night. When you're not used to being out in the wilderness, it's actually kind of shocking how silent everything can be and how dark the world is without light pollution. The outhouse that we'd used was about 75 yards away from the yurt, so you needed a flashlight to get there. The first night we stayed, nature called, so I grabbed a flashlight and I headed outside. I sweep the beam across the darkness, and suddenly I catch a pair of these glowing eyes reflecting off of my flashlight. For a second, it startled me, but it turned out just to be a decent-sized female deer. Still, I realized I would have had absolutely no idea she was there if I hadn't seen the reflection from her eyes. Now, the actual encounter that I want to tell you about happened on our last night there, somewhere between 11 p.m. and midnight. We were sitting inside the yurt, playing cards by the fire, when suddenly we heard this massive crash against the side of the yurt. It sounded like something had either thrown itself into the yurt or was running around and then slammed into it without realizing it was there. It scared the hell out of us. Naturally, we wanted to see what had made the noise, and we were definitely out in the middle of nowhere, but we were still on a property and not super deep into the woods, so I don't think it could have been anything like a bear or a mountain lion. At least, that's what I thought at the time. What happened next is hard to explain. I opened the door and I shined my flashlight out just like I had the night before when I saw the deer. And in the same general spot, I see something. But this was different. There was no eyes shining back at me this time. I only saw it for a moment, maybe a couple of seconds at most, but it looked pale, either white or gray, and it had this real slender build. The part that really creeped me out was the way that it moved. I see it crouch down while facing my direction, almost like it was realizing that I was looking at it. And then it sort of slinks away out of view. The movement reminded me of how a big cat or even a monkey might move when it's trying to stay low to the ground. And then it was gone. I did not go investigate. Honestly, I was too scared. My first thought was that it might have been a cougar or something, and I wasn't about to go walk into the dark and then die in front of my girlfriend. Even though she ended up leaving me not long after that. I don't know, unrelated. But jokes aside, whatever I saw was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. I never got a good look at a face or any real details. Earlier today, I was reading a post on this subreddit where someone described a Bigfoot encounter where the creature was crawling along the ground, and for some reason, that story made me think back to this moment, and honestly, it sent a chill down my spine. Now, I'm not saying what I saw was Bigfoot. It could have been something totally normal. After all, I only saw it for a few seconds. But I've never seen anything move like that in real life, not even in a movie or a TV show. So, I guess I'm wondering if anyone else has ever experienced something like this, or if anyone might have an explanation for what I saw out there that night. Somebody in the comments offers some insight. They say, "It sounds like a crawler was so startled by its interaction with the yurt and potential accidental clumsiness that it was too taken off guard. And it's a little ballsy of you checking on the creature that just made that loud noise outside in the middle of nowhere. Crawlers are like humans, and the Forrest Gump quote goes, they're like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. You're lucky you didn't find out which one you rolled." This person goes on to ask if they saw any features in the face, if there were any large, dark eye sockets, and if the skin on their face moved at all. OP responds with, "Yeah, I guess it was ballsy to see what made the sound, but I was being tough at the time." As far as its appearance goes, it didn't seem to have any facial features. Like I said, I only saw it for a moment, but there were no visible eye sockets or eye shine or anything. The best way I can describe it is if you've ever seen the TV show called The Black Mirror. There's an episode where you can block people in real life, and it makes their appearance look like this gray, fuzzy outline of an actual human being. That's similar to what I saw. It's been about 10 years since this happened, but the event has stuck with me ever since, and I've always wanted to share it. Back in 2014, I was sent to a summer camp in Germany to study the language. The camp was located near the Munich Alps in a very remote area. The only real way in or out was a bus stop on the other side of the lake. Near that stop, there was a small hotel and an abandoned church. Those were the only other buildings anywhere nearby. At the time, Wi-Fi at the camp barely existed. Mobile signal was unreliable too. If you were lucky, you might get half a bar, or maybe one whole bar if the conditions were perfect. The camp itself was surrounded by mountains. If you wanted to leave on foot, you had to hike up the mountains and then continue another 15 to 20 kilometers through dense forest. The weather in that area changed pretty quickly as well. One moment, it would be clear and sunny, and then suddenly it would be rainy and foggy, almost instantly. There were 6 staff members running the camp for about 30 students in total, all between the ages of 13 and 17, and at the time, I was 14. Luckily, I ended up in a good group. I mostly hung out with a few Americans and Australians and some Russians. They were great people, though I eventually lost contact with them over the years. There were also a lot of French and Spanish students there too. Most of my time at that camp was amazing. We spent our days hiking through the mountains for 8 or 9 hours at a time, swimming in the lake, making campfires, shooting bows, and playing sports. Honestly, it was one of the best summers of my life. But during the second week, something happened that completely changed the way I looked at that place. The day started off miserable. It had been raining since early that morning, and the wind was pushing in this thick fog down into the valley, and the temperature couldn't have been more than 10 or 11 degrees Celsius. Looking back, I still can't believe that we all decided to go hiking in those conditions, but nobody objected. The hike itself was rough. As we climbed higher in elevation, the rain and wind only got worse. Eventually, the staff decided that we couldn't continue on and told us that we needed to head back down. During the descent, I started to get this strange feeling like I was being watched. It was this sickening, uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach, but by the time we made it back to camp, the feeling had mostly faded. I mentioned it to one of the guys in my room, but he brushed it off and said I probably just felt sick from the cold weather. Later that evening, the rain finally stopped. Around 5 or 6 in the evening, everyone gathered outside to start a campfire. The mood had completely shifted. Everyone was laughing, relaxing, and they were all enjoying themselves again. One of the guys, Mike, brought out a really powerful flashlight. It was one of those high lumen lights that could illuminate the entire tree line, make it look like daytime. He pointed it towards the forest on the right side of the camp. Around that time, fog started rolling in again from the lake. It slowly filled the campgrounds, but nobody seemed to mind. If anything, people thought it looked kind of cool. Some of the students were even running into the fog to take pictures. I asked Mike if I could borrow his flashlight, and then he handed it over. And for a few minutes, I just played around with it, slowly sweeping the beam from right to left across the area. At one point, I even jokingly said something like, "Hey, imagine if something just jumped out of the woods right now." And then it happened. Right when I turned the light to the left, I suddenly saw this white silhouette walking near the edge of the forest, and I froze. I shouted, "Mike, look, do you see that?" But Mike had already seen it too, and he was also shouting, telling everyone else to look at it as well. As everyone in that courtyard turned their attention toward the figure, it stopped walking, and then it slowly turned its head in our direction. And that's when we saw its eyes. They were glowing yellow. I couldn't tell whether it was eye shine from the flashlight or if they were actually glowing on their own. And this thing had extremely long arms that were almost ape-like. Its hands hung down near its knees. Its body looked kind of muscular, but also slim and athletic at the same time. We were probably 40 meters away, so I couldn't really make out the details of its face. After a few seconds, it turned back toward the forest and then started walking again. One of the staff members that was present ran off to get one of the other members as well because their phone wasn't working. Everything that happened took place in just a few seconds. And then, the creature suddenly looked back toward the forest and ran. And I mean ran. Its speed was unbelievable. It shot uphill faster than anything I'd ever seen before. Faster than a deer. If I had to guess, it must have been moving 40 or even 50 miles an hour. It disappears into the forest almost instantly. Not long after that, the rest of the staff arrived. They quickly gathered everyone and rushed us inside to the buildings. We were told to lock all of the doors and the windows and then stay indoors for the rest of the night. By that point, it was probably 9 p.m. Everyone stayed in their rooms while the staff went around checking to make sure all of the students were accounted for. That night, half the camp stayed awake talking about what we had seen, trying to piece everything together. Throughout the night, we continued to hear strange noises, tapping sounds, and something that sounded like it was moving on the roof. But we couldn't see anything outside because it was completely dark. The next morning, we went outside to find the courtyard covered with small rocks and sticks, like they had been thrown around during the night. After that, things at the camp were different. The weekly hiking schedule was either shortened or completely canceled. The staff held a large meeting and then told us that we weren't to go outside a certain perimeter around the camp anymore, and that whenever we did go outside, we had to stay in a group of 6. After that event, even simple walks around the camp felt different. Everything just felt off, like the world around us had become more hostile than it had just been 2 weeks earlier. Some students left early and went home, and others stayed until the program ended. I left the following week, even though my mom wanted me to stay longer. The next summer, I returned to the camp for 2 more weeks. I had really enjoyed my time there before the incident, and it was still a good place to study the language. But when I arrived, I noticed that a lot had changed. They had built this electric fence around the entire perimeter of the camp. Unfortunately, I accidentally shocked myself on it a couple times. The fence would turn on in the evening and then stay active until early morning, and then it would turn off during the day. When I asked about the fence, the staff said that it was meant to keep the cows away. But I had never seen any cows out there before. They were wanting to keep something else away. So, I don't know how to feel about this because I've never experienced anything even remotely close to this or any type of inexplicable occurrence before. Here's what happened. I was driving home from school one night. It was already dark out, and I was pretty drained from the day. As I was about to get off at my exit, I noticed there was construction that was completely blocking the off-ramp. I could see the cones, the barriers, flashing lights, the whole thing. I got instantly flustered because it's about an hour drive home for me, and I just wanted to be done with it. The thought of having to keep going and loop around through an entirely different city and then come back the long way was not what I wanted. So, I passed the blocked-off exit, very annoyed, and just kept going. A minute or so later, I noticed another exit coming up with the same name as the one that's usually right before mine. I remember thinking, oh, that's odd. I didn't know there were 2 Lucky Drive exits. Then, my actual exit appeared. At that point, I figured maybe it was just an alternate route into the same town. You know, kind of like a second access point that I'd never noticed before. And honestly, I was relieved. I felt like I got lucky and didn't have to take the long way home after all. So, I took it. But as I went down the ramp, everything started just to feel, off. Everything about the exit, like the curve of the road, the way it was bending around, it all looked exactly like my regular exit. And I mean, identical. That's when it really started to mess with me. I even glanced in my rearview mirror, trying to see what exits were behind me, or if I had somehow missed something, but no, there was nothing. I was hoping that this would be some sort of duplicate exit, but there was no sign where I could have turned off earlier. At the time, I don't think I thought too much of it, but it stuck with me. So, the other day, I looked it up, and there is no alternate exit that leads to where I ended up. There is no second Lucky Drive exit, which would mean, inexplicably, I took the original blocked-off exit anyway. I'm still so confused by it. I even told my siblings about it too, and my sister suggested that maybe I just imagined the exit or somehow got turned around. But I know what I saw, and I know what I did. Has anyone else experienced anything like this? Because I genuinely can't explain it. As somebody in the comments says, that's strange. Maybe you experienced some sort of time glitch or some sort of time slip and then you slipped back to when it wasn't blocked off? And the OP responds with, that's what I was thinking. The way I described it was like I was in a video game and just a glitch brought me back to the second before the road work. I obviously didn't notice or feel anything glitchy at the time. I just felt weird thinking that, man, this exit has the exact same layout as my normal one. For some context, I work inside of the library. We're not outside where it would, I guess make sense to see a piece of poop on the ground. And if you're sensitive to that kind of stuff, this story is a poop story. I got in touch with the OP of this story. His name is Mike, and he swears it wasn't him. So, here we go. Today, I had to make up a shift because I missed one last week. The plan was to clock in, work for 4 hours, clock out to grab some food, and then clock back in to work another 4-hour shift. So, I finished my first 4-hour shift and then I ate dinner for about 30 minutes down on the first floor of the library. When I finished, I took the elevator back up to the main floor and I clocked in. I walked behind the circulation desk, which is where I'm mainly positioned, and let me tell you that I did not see anything on the floor. I always look at the floor because, I really just dislike making eye contact with other people. And I recently bought some shoes that I love, so I guess I was just looking at them. I didn't see anything on the floor, and I definitely didn't smell anything either. I sat at the circulation desk, or what we call the circ desk, and nothing happened. No one walked by. There was no movement almost at all. About 40 minutes later, my supervisor was giggling about something behind me, and so I turned around. There was a literal piece of poo on the floor. It looked like dog crap, but there are no animals allowed in this library, especially behind the circ desk. And that's when I started to smell it as well. It was definitely poop. I'm pretty sure the only people who noticed it were my supervisor, one other coworker, and me. My supervisor left to get something to pick it up with, and I just looked around in complete confusion because the time that I had sat down and the time that we had noticed the poo, nobody had gotten up. No one had walked behind me, nothing. We were all just scrolling on our phones, checking stuff on the computer, slow workday stuff. I wasn't that distracted though, because the library is very quiet and we have to pay attention to everything. Like, one particular rule is to periodically look up at the front door to see if anyone is entering. I also look up every time something moves because, I want to look occupied if someone comes up to the circ desk with a question or something. And the poop was directly behind my chair. And I feel like, of course, I would have seen it if it was there earlier, but I really think it just glitched there. Somebody in the comments asks, is it possible that there could be a wild animal that was inside the library that you didn't see or hear? And the OP responds with, we do get lizards up here, but they're very tiny, like they can fit in the palm of your hand. And I certainly don't think they would be leaving drops that large. So this happened to me about 3 years ago, and I still think about it even today. My wife says that I'm just misremembering, but I'm not so sure. This isn't nearly as crazy as some of the other stories in here, and I don't have any definitive truth or evidence to prove this, but I still figured I'd share. Plus, after reading some of these posts in here, it makes me rethink what happened to me on this day. So I came home from work, and as usual, I gave my dog her hugs and kisses. She always gets overly excited when I walk in. Her tail starts going crazy and everything. And then I let her out. I had to use the bathroom bad, and I specifically remember letting her out first. The reason I'm so sure is that as I walked away from the door, I heard her scratching at it, wanting to be back in already. She does this sometimes when I get home. Like, she changes her mind immediately and then expects me to come back out and get her off the porch, but, I really had to go, so I just ignored it. So I go to the bathroom, and I'm in there, scrolling on my phone, not really thinking about much. I finish up, I wash my hands, and then I come out of the bathroom, and she's just laying on the bed, like nothing ever happened. I literally jumped because I was not expecting her to be there at all. I went straight to the back door thinking, oh, maybe I just didn't close it all the way? But it was completely shut. And it's a sliding glass door too, and it's loud enough that I would have heard it open or close even from the bathroom. To this day, I still can't figure out how she got back inside, or if I somehow never let her out in the first place. But that doesn't make any sense either, though, because I'm 99.99% sure that I let her out. I even heard her scratching at the back door. And there's no other possible way for her to get back in the house, and I was home alone at the time. It still trips me out every time I think about it, and I think I've just come to the conclusion that I'll never know. My mother and my younger brother witnessed this with me, or I would have convinced myself that it never happened and I was crazy by now. The three of us are together in a car and my mom is driving. We're heading home this afternoon from one city to ours. It's like a 15 to 20 minute drive, and most of it is a long highway stretch through empty fields, corn on the left, sage and dead plants on the right. It's flat, broad daylight. There are no buildings or alleyways or anything to hide in. We're driving in complete silence, with all of the windows up. The radio isn't even on, and we're all tired, so we're not even chatting. Both my mother and my brother are listening to either music or a podcast with some cheap headphones in their ears. Nothing loud or noise canceling or anything. And I'm totally aware I've got nothing in my ears. There's a few cars ahead of us going the same way, and one behind us. One pickup truck passes us in the two lanes going the opposite way, over on our left about 5 to 10 seconds before this happens. It's been silent for a while, and all of a sudden we hear a semi-truck's horn just start blaring, very, very loud and very close. I swear it was to my right, but there was only fields over there. We were in the right lane. So it confused me the more I run this through my head. I jump out of my skin. My mom panics because she's wondering if she's in someone's way or in a blind spot or something. I immediately check the mirrors, expecting to see a semi right behind us wanting to go faster or get around us or something. Even though we're doing the speed limit, it's 55 and they could have passed us on the left. But there were no trucks. There were no other cars at all behind us, and the roads all around us were now empty except for, a few cars up ahead. We thought it could be a train horn too while we ran all of the possibilities through our heads, but there's no train tracks near where we were, and again it was just empty fields all around. We're all pretty skeptical on the ghost or supernatural side of things, but I've never heard my mom say, well, that was a little paranormal. Maybe we passed near a veil and in a parallel universe are now dealing with a vehicular accident with a semi. We get somebody in the comments that says, this is so creepy. I'm actually very happy you guys didn't crash from being scared. I would have jerked the wheel in surprise if this happened to me. And the OP responds with, it was terrifying. The whole drive home after that, we'd all acknowledged each other that we all just experienced the same thing and that we weren't all going crazy. We kept trying to get words out to explain possibilities, but nothing ever made any sense. I've never really had a glitch happen to me before, and I'm not even sure if this counts as one. Maybe you can help me out. But no matter what, it's still completely unexplainable. So earlier today, I was sitting on my bed with my door slightly ajar and my window open. When I leave my door like that, it's usually pretty secure. It kind of just sticks in the door frame as it is, so it doesn't just swing open from a draft. But it's still loose enough that my cat can push it open with his paw whenever he wants to come in. Anyway, so I'm sitting there, scrolling on my phone, when I suddenly see the door open by itself. At first, I'm not too freaked out because I swear I hear the sound of my cat pawing at the door. He's a pretty big cat with heavy paws and claws, so I'm really familiar with the scratching, pushing noise that he makes when he wants in. But then the door opens a little more, and there's no cat. I remember just staring at the doorway for a second, expecting him to walk in, but nothing happened. There was no movement, not even any sounds, just my empty hallway. I thought it was a bit weird, but I brushed it off. I got up, I pushed the door back to its usual slightly open position, and then went back to sitting on my bed. Then about 5 minutes later, it happens again. The door slowly creaks open, and once again I hear that same very specific sound, like claws lightly scraping and a paw pushing against the wood. But this time, I immediately look up and I swear I even see the shadow of what looks like my cat coming in through the hallway as the door moves. But again, he never shows up. At that point, I actually start to feel a little uneasy. So I went downstairs to tell my mom what had just happened, and when I got there, my cat was fast asleep on the sofa, completely knocked out, like he hadn't moved in a while. So, yeah, maybe that could have been a draft from the open window somehow, even though the door doesn't usually move like that. But that still doesn't explain the distinct sound of his paws or the shadow that I saw. This was recent, so I thought I might share for people who were interested. We have 2 large dogs, and we live in the country. Inside, they have 2 beds with a caged-off area. The cages are not enclosed at the top, so they can get out if they really wanted to. But they normally stay in the caged area unless we leave them alone inside, which we had to for a while due to broken fencing outside. We fixed up the fence so they didn't have to get caged in the house anymore. They can and would often get out of their area anyway, so it was more to contain them while we fixed up the fence. It was useful when they were puppies, but not so much anymore. Normally when I leave the house and my boyfriend is at work, the dogs go outside. If he's not working and is home in the morning sleeping in, when I leave, the dogs stay inside so they don't bark at me when I drive away and wake him up. This was one of those mornings. I gave the dogs a bone each to keep them occupied while boyfriend slept and I left. I went to a couple of appointments and I came home at about lunchtime. I asked my boyfriend if he had a good sleep in, and he said no, not in an angry way, just in a matter-of-fact way. I was slightly annoyed at the dogs as I assumed they must have barked while inside, even though I gave them bones to occupy them. But I was wrong. He told me when I left he heard them outside barking at the gate, so he left them out there because he knew they were barking at me leaving. That confused me because I know I left them inside. There's no way they would have let themselves out or shut the door behind themselves. The door opens inwards, and it's a knob-style door handle. They obviously don't know how to work that. I checked their beds, and sure enough, the fresh bones were there. I hadn't left the dogs inside for weeks previously due to our schedules. I just hadn't needed to. So, it's not like those were yesterday's bones, because we don't let them eat bones inside often. It's pretty messy. But I had made an exception that morning to try to let my tired boyfriend sleep in after his recent crazy work schedule. He is adamant that he didn't let them out, and I believe him. I know I left them inside, or they wouldn't have had the bones on the bed. The bones would have been outside if they'd already been eaten. They're rib bones, and they're big dogs. Those things would have been demolished. I also know the dogs didn't follow me out accidentally. That simply cannot happen. I gave them a rib bone each, I shut the door to their barrier cage, and then skedaddled. I came home to find that they'd somehow gotten outside while I was driving away, and I didn't hear them barking. But the weird part is, I do have to stop about 30 meters away from the house yard gate to open the main gate onto the road, and the dogs are not quiet when they're outside and someone is leaving. People might say I'm just misremembering, leaving them inside, but I certainly am not. The bones would not have been inside on their beds otherwise. Boyfriend even confirmed the bones were there on the beds himself. We just can't understand how they were outside if I'd left them in with the bones. He didn't let them out, neither did I. And nobody else could have. I'm just not sure what happened. This is not the first time something like this has happened, by the way. Weird, inexplicable things, but this definitely was strange due to the bones on the bed. I'm not sure if this is a glitch in the Matrix event, or maybe some sort of parallel universe type of occurrence. Honestly, I'm still trying to figure out the difference between the two categories. But have you ever experienced something that was broken, like an object, or a piece of clothing, or I guess even an appliance, only to discover later that it actually was no longer broken without any explanation? Here are two examples of how this happened to me and my wife. First was a Christmas wreath container. It's those red and clear Rubbermaid kind that you find at almost any box store around the holidays. We bought one about 5 years ago, and around year 3 of owning this thing, the little clips and the tabs that hold it closed snapped off. 2 of them did, in fact. We used tape to hold it together, and we put our wreath in it after Christmas of 2023. That same season, we took advantage of some post-holiday sales, and we purchased a second one. It was identical. We got it at a discount, and we put it in the attic along with the previous broken one that was already housing the wreath that we took down. For whatever reason, we just didn't swap the wreath to the new one just yet. All we did was just throw the new empty one to the attic next to the existing one. Well, fast forward to holiday season 2024. I go up to the attic to pull down all of the holiday decor, and I get the empty new wreath container, and I go ahead and pass it down to my wife. I then find the older, broken wreath container with the wreath still in it, and I pass that one down as well, and that is when I hear my wife ask, "Wait, where did this one break again?" I came down the attic ladder to see what she was talking about and to show her where the clips had broken off. Then I realized she was holding the wreath container with the wreath inside, and all of the clips and the tabs were perfectly intact. That container was mysteriously good as new, and the actual new one, the one that we had bought just at the end of last year, was obviously still good to go as well. It's not even been used yet. To this day, we're both still dumbfounded about how this happened. We continue to use the old one, and haven't started to use the new one yet since the old one still works and is somehow magically fixed. The second time something like this happened was pretty recently. It was over the summer, actually. I had purchased an Owala free sip tumbler. It was 40 ounces, and I got it in black. After a few days of use, though, I noticed that the handle on it was starting to come loose. I didn't feel like returning a used tumbler to the store, so I actually decided to try out Owala's warranty claim and just see how that went. I sent a short video of the handle being wobbly on the tumbler, and then they emailed me back asking for a longer video that showed it loose. So, I had my wife video from the cell phone while I grabbed the tumbler by its handle and shook it pretty quick. You can clearly see the wobble in the video, and you can even hear it clicking with each change in direction. Owala honored the warranty claim, and they sent a voucher for the amount spent on the cup to reorder another one. But, I was honestly just turned off by the quality, so I told my wife that she could use the credit to order herself one if she wanted, which she did. I told her I'd just use the wobbly cup around the house. No big deal. About a week later, my wife randomly asks me, "Hey, how did you fix your Owala handle?" And I said, "What do you mean? I didn't..." And then she said, "But I washed it today and it's all fixed. It's sturdy. You did a great job." So I went to check the dish drying rack in the kitchen, and sure enough, the tumbler now has a perfectly tight and firm handle. The wobble is all gone. There's no exposed screws to tighten, and there's no way to actually fix that thing as it's spot welded at the factory from what I've come to understand. Once again, we were both perplexed as to how this was happening, especially since this time we actually have video of the cup being loose. Now, the only odd similarity is that both of these items were purchased from our local Target. Not that this has anything to do with the end result, but I don't know. Don't you think it's interesting that the 2 times this has happened, the products that we purchased were both from the same store? Do you have any ideas? Anyone ever experienced anything similar? Just to give a bit of background, I've had a lot of unusual experiences in my life, things that I couldn't easily explain. They started back in my high school years, and this is just one of those moments that stuck with me ever since. I don't usually talk about this with people, but, the more I thought about it, the more I decided I should actually share it with you. I genuinely feel like there's more to reality than we understand. Because of these experiences, and I'll go into detail into one of them in just a moment, I became curious, and I wanted to test things for myself to see if I could somehow read people or pick up on information that I shouldn't have access to. You could call it an energy reading, I guess, or maybe intuition, and I guess if you're a skeptic, then it just looks like a guessing game, but to me, it felt like, I was trying to poke at the edges of reality and just see what would happen. At the time, I was using an IRC chat client. It was completely text-based. There was no voice, no video, nothing that could give away any personal details. I started chatting with someone, and eventually we agreed to try giving each other a reading. We didn't know each other at all. There was no shared background, no prior information, and that was particularly important to me. I didn't want vague, open guesses. I wanted something that felt way more specific, something that couldn't easily be explained away. So I sat down, I closed my eyes, and I tried to clear my mind as much as possible. I focused on being still, just waiting for anything to come through. And then suddenly, a word appears in my mind, clear as day. Talons. It was spelled out perfectly, letter by letter in my mind, and the clarity of it actually caught me off guard. I immediately typed it out into the chat and I sent it to him, asking if it meant anything. There was a pause for a moment, and then he responded, "Oh my God." He told me that Talons was the name of his romantic partner, and I just sat there staring at the screen, I had no idea how to explain how that thought entered my mind. I didn't know what I had done differently or why that moment worked when nothing else had before. All I did was clear my mind and wait, and then something just came to me. After that, I tried repeating the same process with other people that I didn't know as an experiment, to see if I could replicate it. Most of the time, it didn't work as good as this one did. Almost never, actually. I didn't get anything right. No accurate words, no meaningful connections. It was just random thoughts that weren't leading to anywhere, really. Which is what makes that one experience stand out even more. Statistically, I don't think that was possible. Felt like hitting a 1 in a million jackpot, like guessing the lottery number correctly on my very first try. I know some people will be skeptical. I understand that. They'll say it was a coincidence or that it was just a random lucky guess, and, maybe it was. But I've had enough experiences like this to make me question that explanation. This next story was submitted directly to me via email from Santiago. Santiago says, "This event happened just a few days ago and in the presence of a friend of mine. It was late afternoon on a Tuesday, and I met up with my friend because we wanted to go shopping after work at the mall. When we took a break to smoke a cigarette on the mall's outdoor terrace, one of us had the brilliant idea of going out to dinner that night at a Ukrainian food restaurant. It's worth noting that the first and only time we had been there was 4 months earlier. We were both really excited because that restaurant serves truly delicious and very traditional Ukrainian food. However, a few minutes later, my friend asked whether, instead of going that night, it might be better to plan for Wednesday, which was the following day. I didn't object, and I said that dinner could be postponed until Wednesday. No problem. And so it was. The next day, Wednesday comes and we went there for dinner. The restaurant is extremely small. It's very traditional and cozy. And throughout our entire dinner, no other customers walked in. We had a wonderful meal, and at the end, we asked the man at the counter what desserts they had available. And he replied, "Oh, well, it's the exact same that we had yesterday." My friend and I went silent because we were a little bit confused by that statement, and I asked him what he meant by it. He then asked us whether the two of us had been there the day before, with an additional third person having dinner. Now, we were extremely confused again, and we replied that the last time we'd been at this restaurant was 4 months ago. As soon as we told him this, his facial expression changed from confused to scared. It was really the expression of someone who was certain that he had seen us the day before. I understand that he might simply have been mistaken and seen someone who looked similar to us. However, if it had been just, one of us, I could understand it, but the two of us having potential doppelgangers show up at his restaurant the day before? That's strange. Even more curious is the fact that we were actually supposed to have gone for dinner the night prior, but then canceled it. So my question is, if we had gone there on Tuesday, would we have met our doppelgangers? And do you think that we created a split timeline by canceling Tuesday night dinner and switching it to Wednesday instead? And this fella behind the counter of the restaurant got to see both timelines. What do you think? I've got a quick little note on email submissions. First of all, thank you to everyone who's ever sent me one. I'm truly appreciative. I kind of sit on those for like a few weeks or even like a month or more sometimes, and I don't always respond to them right away. Actually, I never respond to them right away. The reason is I keep them unopened until I'm actually ready to sit down and open one up to hit record. So if you send me one, at the beginning of the month and I don't say thank you until the middle of next month, I hope you don't take it personally. That's how I organize my stories. If I keep them unread, unopened, they stay easily visible for me to find them later. So anyway, you'll know as soon as I record yours because that's when I reply. So that's all. Thank you for sending me stories. I'm working through them. Let's do another one. This one is from Olive. My coworkers and I experienced a small glitch in the Matrix together. We were getting new office chairs and were told to push our old ones into the basement. The basement door had a vertical 4-digit combination lock, so I needed to ask the manager for the code. I specifically asked my teammates to come with me because I have a terrible memory with numbers. If someone tells me a sequence, I have to repeat it out loud over and over until I can finally write it down. If I get distracted during that process, I will inevitably have to go back and ask again. I've always been this way, even as a child. 4 of us walk into the manager's office and asked for the combination. He says 1, 2, 4, 3. I immediately came up with a way to remember it. In my head, I turned the numbers into a little story. 1 times 2 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 4 minus 1 is 3. That was the little thing that just worked in my brain in the moment. I repeated that out loud to my coworkers, and I even pantomimed entering the code with my hand. The lock was vertical, with 1 at the bottom closest to the doorknob. So I imagined pressing 1, moving my finger up to 2, up again to 4, and then back down to 3. I felt confident. I had a mnemonic device, a physical pattern with my hand, and even a mental rehearsal of what it would feel like to press each button in sequence. We get back down to the basement, and I call out, "What's the code?" And everyone answers in unison, 1, 2, 4, 3. I enter it, the door opens, and we dropped off the first round of chairs, and we went back upstairs to get the rest. When we returned again, I playfully asked, "What's the code?" Even though by then I was confident that I had it locked into memory. Everyone says, of course, 1, 2, 4, 3. I enter the code again, and it fails. I try it again. Still nothing. 2 more people stepped in and tried the same sequence, but it wasn't working anymore. So we all just stood there, studying the lock. Had we somehow all gotten it wrong? Someone pulled out their phone and called the manager, and he said, it's either 1, 2, 4, 3 or 4, 3, 2, 1. So we tried 1, 2, 4, 3 again, now freshly confirmed by the boss, and it still wasn't working. Finally, someone says, "Well, try the second one. He said it might be 4, 3, 2, 1. So we do, and it works. The door swings wide open, almost on its own. We were baffled, and it made no sense. How could we all have been wrong like that? How could it have worked the first time? I had carefully rehearsed the sequence in my mind, starting from the button closest to the doorknob. The motion was up, 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 down. The new sequence started at the button furthest from the doorknob at the very top, now going down, 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 down. It was nearly the complete opposite motion, numerically and physically. We left the chairs in the basement and went back upstairs. Everyone starts offering their theories. Maybe the lock reset. Maybe someone pressed too hard. Some locks have a timing mechanism on them. Maybe that has something to do with something. Eventually, the conversation fizzled out. People returned to their desks and nobody brought it up again. I finally asked, "So, are we all just going to pretend that didn't happen?" No one answered. I don't know. I guess some things are just better left alone.